pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to our meeting for October 25th. We have the minutes from the September 27th meeting in front of us for approval.
Will they be approved?
Moving to second. Any further discussion? Any public discussion? All in favor of approval?
Aye.
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 Now we're going to have the report of the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee. Before they get started, I want to thank them very much for the incredible amount of time and effort they've put in on this. We really appreciate it. The Radnor's blessed to have some very talented people living here, and one of the ways that you recognize as you did your report that we can save money is by taking advantage of all this wonderful talent. So, Sarah, are you making the presentation? Okay, thank you. Take it.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Armstrong. I'm the chairwoman of the Citizens Budget and Finance Advisory Committee. We're here this evening to make a brief presentation of our final report, which was submitted on October 15th. After the presentation, we'd be happy to take any questions or comments. I want to start by thanking the committee for their serious commitment to this project and for collectively spending over 1,200 hours producing the reported recommendations. I feel very lucky to have worked with this group of outstanding professionals. The other committee members are Robert Boehringer, Joseph Ellis, Nick Kemp, Jerry Linden, Robert Murdoka, Craig Wieland, and Philip Wilson. Chris Watson, who was with us at the beginning, was accepted to law school and had to resign from the committee, which is good news for him. I would also like to thank Bill Martin, who helped get the committee started with our task, and Bob Zinkowski, Bill White, and many others here at the Township who've done a great job assisting us with this effort. Finally, I'd like to thank the commissioners for this opportunity to serve Radnor and for having us here this evening. It was very difficult to boil down 10 months of work in a 45-page report into what we consider the highlights. I'll start by encouraging everyone to read the full report, or at a minimum, the executive summary. There is no doubt that difficult decisions and heavy lifting are in front of us to correct the financial situation here at the Township. The problem did not happen overnight, and it won't be fixed overnight. That being said, you have to start somewhere, and we urge the Radnor citizens to become involved in being part of the solution. The commissioners and township staff are going to need the support of the Radnor residents, and we'll all need to work together. So, without further ado, on to the presentation. So just as some general background, maybe some of you, we've had 2 public meetings to date. This is our third and final presentation. We were formed and the resolution was passed in February of this year. We're a volunteer group. We are strictly advisory in nature, and we were formed to address the budget and financial issues here at the Township. The final report is available on radnor.com on the homepage. Next slide. Our approach was to focus on what Radnor residents truly want from their local government. We wanted to increase citizen participation within the township's budgeting process. Through the efforts of the Citizens Budget Survey, we were soliciting public input. We wanted to understand the programmatic demands from department heads and the public. We acknowledge that there are tough decisions that have to be made. We wanted to remain open-minded and recognize there are no bad ideas, be creative and seek innovative solutions. And we offered our recommendations based on a majority view of the committee members, and we aim to understand accurately, recommend intelligently, and communicate without judgment. Next slide. Summary of activities. We've held semi-monthly working sessions since the beginning of the year as a group. We've reviewed and analyzed township documents to the extent that they've existed, conducted interviews with township department heads to better understand township programs and services. Because debt is a large part of the overall financial picture for the township, we've met with bond counsel and the advisor to discuss the township's current debt burden. Communicated with and met with township personnel frequently to piece together the township's entire land position. met with the township manager to discuss his vision for the township, and we've held 2 public meetings in April and in June, and in May, we issued some interim recommendations as the board had requested. So the final report, as I said, is available on radnor.com. Also, the full results of the survey are available on the sub-page on radnor.com for the committee itself. The report is structured into 8 sections. I won't read them to you, but there's 8 different sections here, which are really the main components of the financial picture here in Radnor Township. The appendix is filled with a ton of data, so for the data junkies out there, and we have some on the committee, there's a lot of really interesting work that was done, and the results are there for your review. So we'll get right to it, our top 5 recommendations. Because the total employee cost is such a large part of the overall budget, and that would include not just base pay, but all of the benefits here at the township, there is an opportunity to have some cost savings, and we don't recommend a particular way to get there. That is up to the township employees and township staff and the commissioners, but there are opportunities there through contract negotiation with the unions as well as other negotiations with township employees to kind of level set the benefits and the total employee costs for the township. Payment in lieu of taxes for Eastern, Cabrini, and Villanova. This is something that is being done in other communities in the United States. Princeton is a good example. There are some others where they make a payment in lieu of taxes. That would need to be negotiated with those universities. The township provides tremendous services to those universities. We recommended a $10 per resident fee. That's $20. I'm sorry, $20. And that's certainly negotiable. And what we really recommend is that over time, the true cost of providing those services is calculated. But again, it's good to start somewhere. We also didn't want to make it overly burdensome. And the reality is those costs would probably be passed on to the student. Implement an immediate moratorium on acquisition of any additional open space. We have a lot more detail as to why we make that recommendation in the full report, and happy to take questions about that tonight. There are some one-time benefits. There's an opportunity to do some bond refinancing. We recommend that the commissioners do that. I believe they've actually already approved doing that. There's some significant savings there. It's kind of like renegotiating your mortgage and getting a better rate. And then we've identified some properties, 9 properties in Radnor Township that we recommend be sold, or that they pursue what we could get for those. We have some pretty conservative numbers as to what a sales price could be. So the overall top 5 would be a $6.34 to $7.46 million financial impact to the township benefit. I'm going to, at this point, pass this over to Philip, who ran our citizen survey. Why don't you go ahead there, Philip? You have to hit that.
Guess I'm too tall for this. Philip Wilson, also part of the Citizens Board Advisory Committee. I also want to thank all the individuals on our team that participated in this. I got to learn a lot about not only Radnor Township, about other people that are considered and considerate of what's going on in the township. So I wanted to thank them and this opportunity. So the matter at hand is the survey. One of the things that we wanted to do as a committee was, and was part of our charge, is to find out what the citizens, that us, you, really wanted out of the township, and to solicit your ideas. We were not the survey makers in terms of this is not our business, so we put together the best survey that we could as simply as possible. And as a number of people pointed out, it's not a scientific survey, so please hold that question back. But it is an attempt to gather information and the citizens' thoughts. We put it out on the web, the township website. We also put hard copies of the survey into the library at the Senior Center here at the Township Building. Thank you. So we try to make it as available as possible. What we really found out was we put it out there, we didn't have any expectations. Actually, we held our expectations low. We had 740 people respond to the survey. The survey also had 338 people that took additional time to write in their thoughts into the survey. Those aren't published, but they were also very intriguing, helpful, insightful, but some were not able to be published. So the real issue was that we got a lot of response, and I'm sure if we went to a marketing firm and found out, the 3% response rate for however many people could have taken the survey was quite significant. So I'll leave it at that. One of the important parts of it to understand who responded to the survey would be some of the demographics. From the 740 people that responded, 98% were Radnor residents, 96% owned their own home here in Radnor, 99% of them were over the age of 24. How far, I didn't say. 68% have lived in Radnor greater than 10 years. So you have to admit that's pretty reflective of a solid citizen survey. We asked 3 questions. There were some demographic questions, but really 3 significant questions regarding finances in the township. The first one dealt with how Radnor should increase revenues in 2011, should it be needed, and it really is a question of service fees and or taxes. That was the first question. The second question, what expenses should we cut as a township, should we need to, for 2011? The third question was, should we have surpluses in the future? What should we do with those surpluses? So we tried to keep the questions as easy as possible. We did have a debate internally early on, should we put expense dollars to the questions so that we could educate and give as much information as possible on the expense questions. We found that would have been overly cumbersome and we never would have gotten it right. So there wasn't any expense dollars in the survey. When we look at the actual results, for the purposes of tonight and the next slide, essentially we looked at those questions where people, greater than 70% of the people agreed or were in the same camp. So we took that as a super majority, and there's all kinds of other information and other results that you'll find in the specific survey that's online. And I ask you to go look at it. It has a lot of useful information. But just for tonight's purposes, or at least at this point, what we found was, in terms of the question of service fees and or tax increases, should we need to do such, 79% of Radnor said they do not want a new 1% income tax. 70% said we don't want any real estate tax increases, real estate property tax increases. When we tabulated the answers for where the expenses should be cut if we had to do such, again, we didn't provide dollar figures, just different services. From that, more than 70%, actually less than 30% agreed in terms of how the question was, but 70% said that they would not want to cut expenses for fire, ambulance, police, and that's police for activities for security purposes as opposed to traffic control, which was a separate item altogether. Road repair was another high item, sewer maintenance, snow removal, trash collection, and library services. These were the preferred services. When we got to looking at expenses, well, the other half of the expenses on the flip side, in terms of people that were wanting to keep our fire and ambulance services, the flip side of those that didn't, the expenses that were less desirable were the winter recreation programs, the beautification efforts in Radnor, Radnor Studio One assistance, and open space purchases. So those were that fell on the low end as opposed to the others on the high end. Then the final question that we asked was, should we have surplus? What do we do with the money? And 78%, 78.5% said put it in the rainy day fund for other things. The next page in the presentation that has, those are the tabulations for the expenses in terms of if we had to cut expenses, where would you want to? So I'm not going to go over those specifically, but that's the detail to the second question. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Philip. All right, the next slide. Thanks, Bill. Radnor Township debt. This is something we spent a lot of time looking at once we got a good understanding of the overall financial picture here at Radnor Township. There will be a debt payment that needs to be made before the end of the year, and that debt payment will be $4.5 million. The total principal as of now, or as of the time of this, $56 million and change. Interest due, $33.5. So the total principal and interest due between now and 2037 is over $90 million. I found this very interesting because someone said to me, they said, well, I feel like I get a lot from Radnor Township for what I pay. And I said, I can see why you think that, and I agree with that. But the thing you have to consider is that what you're paying annually for your taxes does not necessarily directly correlate to the cost of all of the services provided because of the debt. So once you take into account the debt picture and what we owe collectively as Radnor residents between now and 2037, that is over $90 million. If you take the average assessment, which in Radnor Township is $313,000, the average assessed personal property, you may be more, you may be less. That information is on your tax bill. You can also find that on the county website. Based on the average assessment, to pay off just the principal, we'd each have to pay almost $5,700, which is about the 5 years' worth of average taxes in Radnor. So you have to take all of those things together to understand the total financial picture and where we as a community need to go. Okay. And that ends our formal presentation. Like I said, there's a 45-page report available for anyone who would like to read it. We went back and forth about how much detail we wanted to put in the report, and the conclusion as a group was that we would provide essentially an executive summary. You can just read the first 5 pages if you'd like, and then if you want to go into the detail of the recommendations in the first 5 pages, that's in the full report. So thank you. I think I'll speak for all of us, and we thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. This was a great opportunity for us. We thoroughly enjoyed each other, and we thank the commissioners and Radnor Township staff very much. And at this point, I would love to hear any for the group, and depending on the question, the content of the question, I may pass you off to the committee expert on that topic. So if there's any questions first from maybe the board or township staff, we'd love to take that and then open it up for any questions or comments.
Well, first of all, the intention is to give this report to the staff so they can use it for consideration in their budget. So I don't know that we're looking for any in-depth debate on this report tonight, but we are interested in folks with might have clarifying questions or may have some information that you did not have the privilege of hearing before.
That would be great.
So open it to the commissioners first.
Well, I just want to say thank you. I think I speak for everyone in saying this is just an extraordinary piece of, you did a great job. It's very professional, it's thoughtful, it's thorough. I myself was really impressed when I read it, and I know pretty much everyone I spoke to was as well. So thank you for all the time you put in and for all of your skill and expertise. There are many items in this, many recommendations, I should say, that are slam dunks. And that, I mean, I would say most of them are great ideas that I would love to see us start to implement immediately. Many of them we already have started from your interim recommendations and have, percolated through staff already. Of course, there are a few with which I have some pretty serious concerns, although I'm not sure that tonight or this venue is where we want to address those. That is something I wanted to kind of clear up. We, in our little, handy-dandy schedule, said we were going to kind of come up with a plan of action based on these recommendations. Is that something that we would do at this meeting? Or should we let this percolate, let our staff look at it, and perhaps even schedule a separate meeting dedicated to these items, these recommendations?
Well, I think once the staff has an opportunity to mull over some of these, we need to have a finance committee meeting, basically.
Well, I'd love to do that sooner rather than later, because
We have to. We're on
right.
a tight schedule.
And I want to make sure staff gets good direction on, what to spend time and energy on and what not to spend time and energy on. But I'm unsure of whether that's going to happen tonight or whether we're scheduling a separate meeting. Given the length of our agenda tonight.
Yeah, I think we should do that as a separate meeting or in individual work between the commissioners and the staff, working through Bob.
Sure, we can do that. We can look at, as part of the budget process, incorporating some of these comments in here. I'm sure there'll be a lot more dialogue. One of the things I would recommend to the board is to, if these members are willing to, is to make them a permanent part of the township as their committee, because one is the basis to follow up on this as well as an independent group, but also too, I think, to utilize the CBFAC also as another means of an audit, to actually sit with the auditors to go through the audit report, because again, if things aren't being addressed or being corrected as cited by the auditors, I'm sure this group is going to make those citations very much aware to the board, to the public, to the administration, which possibly, if this group was in place and the audit reports were being looked at previously, it may not have put the township in the situation where it is currently. So I think that one of the things I would recommend is to make this group a permanent fixture here in the township.
John Rice, that would be done by ordinance if we want to make this a permanent committee?
Well, you establish them by resolution. So you would simply amend that resolution or create a new resolution with a charge. I think the original charge was for the report, series of items to be done by the 15th of October.
Okay, so unless any other commissioner has an issue with that, I'd like you to proceed with drafting that permanent change.
Excuse me?
Are they interested?
Well, that's where I'd like to start. This was a huge commitment of personal time, and I would hate to just let this motion go forward without talking to the group and see who is interested in continuing and in what capacity and et cetera. So
my suggestion would be you can have a resolution and the appointments can be totally different.
Oh, I think a group like this is wonderful. I would love to see more groups, citizen groups. So if the appointments are a separate issue, we can take that up
I
another
think just
time.
to clarify
I just
that-
didn't want to volunteer everyone.
Well, I would like to see the current group stay through the end of the budget prep and approval. Right.
Yeah, and to clarify that we are required by the charter by resolution to appoint a permanent committee rather than an ad hoc committee. So we're not going to lock the door and make you stay here, but we appreciate your volunteer efforts so far.
Yes, thank you.
Well, okay, I take it that we're going to be addressing this at a separate meeting, but so I will leave my comments about the merit and the substance of the recommendations regarding the open space program for another time. There are just a few logistical and practical matters I wanted to point out that everyone take into consideration when they're thinking through this, and they pertain to the sale of open space. And there were 9, I think, parcels that were recommended to be put up for sale. And I just need to point out that it's not that simple. When you purchase open space with money, electoral debt, Act 153 electoral debt, there is a pretty specific way. You can resell it, but there are pretty serious constraints. As I understand it, you have to go to referendum to sell land that is purchased by electoral debt. And so, that's a process and an expense in and of itself. In addition, there's a provision in Act 153 that you have to offer it back to the original seller at the original price as well, and they're given 90 days to take that offer. So I would imagine that your potential upside of making money on those parcels is limited if those particular sellers decide to take advantage of that opportunity. Even if the land wasn't purchased through Act 153, which pretty much anything from 1996 on was, because that's when we did our electoral debt referendum. But for the few parcels that were purchased before then, it's still very difficult to sell open space. There's been a recent Supreme Court decision that takes it kind of out of the hands of the municipalities and puts it in the hands of the orphans court to make the decision whether, in certain circumstances, open space is suitable for resale, to put it simply. So I just want to put out there that this is an issue that, in my mind, it makes perfect sense that the legislature made it really difficult for municipalities to resell money that they taxed people for earlier to buy open space with, because that's what people agreed to get taxed for. They didn't agree for a resale later on in a budget crisis. So that is something I want everyone to be aware of while we're debating this and thinking whether that would be a recommendation we'd consider. I also have, more substantive reasons and points that I'd like to make eventually about our open space program and its importance to this community, but I don't think I need to make those tonight if we're not going to be coming up with our action plan.
In response to that, I would ask that our solicitor prepare a report to the board detailing the parcels and properties detailed in the report, and give us an indication of which ones are bound by these limitations. No sense wasting time if we are bound by certain limitations, but if there are properties that are clear and are possibly of high value and little use to residents of the township, we want to consider selling those if we can. In addition to that, there were some long-term recommendations that I really appreciated the most in this report, because most of the issues that we're facing fiscally are a result of a lack of good fiscal policy and good written policy. What I did see in here is that we should have a land acquisition policy and also a debt issuance policy. And I'll ask that administration work on producing some drafts of ordinance in that area, certainly in the debt issuance policy, because to date we don't have a policy in place, and I think that would be a good start. We did this with the fund balance policy, and it's proven to be a good tool. In addition to that, I looked over the numbers. I did hear a number that I may not agree with, and it may be true, it may not be true. I think you believe to come up with a metric on the debt per resident or debt per household. And I've been doing this calculation for a number of years now, and I'm coming up with a number much higher. But it may be a case where I'm using a different number of households versus taxpayers. And
You may also include the 5,600 number I quoted would be if we collectively all wrote checks today and paid off the principal. So it's just like your mortgage. You've got your principal and your interest. If we had to pay off the $90 million, over the term, we're each going to pay over $9,000.
Right.
For your average assessed home of $313,000. So if your home's assessed more, you're going to pay more.
That's right. So maybe we can refine that number, get a good idea. I think I had the count at about 7,800 tax-paying households in the township, and if you use that number, it comes out to about 11,500.
Yeah.
11,500.
We did a lot of work on that particular issue, and we'd be happy to share all that with you.
And I think that's an important number, because until you find out what you owe personally, it doesn't mean anything to how much debt we have. So thank you.
Oh, sorry. There's a page in the report, too, about population and households. So we kind of tried to delve into that, and we come up with about 10,000 households, which, if you got numerators and denominators, what'd you say, 7,800 is what you come up with?
Yeah, and it's important to distinguish between residences and other types of properties.
We have that data too. We could help out with that.
We were talking about selling open space. Most of that open space I was responsible for purchasing, and most of them were 4 to 3 votes. And there's a lot of history that goes into that. We did raise the real estate transfer tax 0.25% to fund open space. At that time, we did a $10 million bond issue, and that was going to be funded by $337,000 a year collected with the real estate transfer tax. It just going up and up and up, and we were collecting as much as 800 and some. It's down now. But that $10 million in debt, that $337,000, we then picked up all the open space bond issues are paid out of that 0.25% increase in the real estate transfer tax, which buyers and seller pay. So for that, whatever that is, $15, $20 million in debt, the taxpayers are not paying that. That's paid out of the real estate transfer tax. People buying and selling their homes pay that. The property tax hasn't raised because of that. And I've done about 10 sewer projects in my ward, which increased the debt, but the residents all pay that amount with a 6% interest on the unpaid balance every year. So there's a lot goes into this debt. The taxpayers aren't paying that $90 million worth of debt. Some of it's paid out of transfer tax, some of it's paid out of residents that they got the benefit of that. But we have tough financial times. We've got some tough decisions to make. But when you stop and look at the corner of South Devon Avenue and Conestoga Road, they were going to rip down every tree, bring in 4 or 5 feet of fill, and put 20 houses in a traffic light there. It took a 4 to 3 vote to condemn that. It was so unpopular. But that piece of ground absorbs a lot of water that protects the homes downstream that do get a lot of water now, but this helps protect them. The 2 Plant Avenue properties, there's a stream there. That area gets flooded. That helps with those properties not being built on, helps that area. The piece on the corner of Sproul Road, they were going to put a house on the corner of Sproul Road in South Springville. We bought that for $70,000, and it's a nice little wooded area. On Lancaster Pike, they were going to put 15 townhouses, and we bought that place for open space. And I've done a lot of campaigning in Radnor, and the overwhelming majority of the residents that I represent are in favor of that. So I'd have a tough time selling off a piece of open space unless it was completely worthless. But to tell you the truth, in my mind, there's no worthless open space. So we'll certainly continue to have a debate about that, but I just wanted to put my position forward real early. Thank you.
Can I just add one more point to the point Bill made about the live-in tract on South Devon? I've made this point before, I'll make it again. It's not a simple financial analysis, open space versus development. Yes, development will bring in taxes from the houses that actually end up going there. But in that particular case, as in many cases, 20 townhomes were supposed to go there. The open space was purchased in part to prevent that. 20 houses equals a lot of school children. And every single year, to the tune of $13,000, $14,000 per child every year from now to eternity. Forget the 30-year bond period. So it's a complex financial decision. It's not always true that a township benefits and gets the better deal when development goes in. Very often, the numbers work the other way. So in doing that analysis for each parcel, you have to take all of the factors into consideration, including what it's going to cost us in the long run to provide for the residents that move into that development.
Just to highlight that, since I love giving an education lesson, I've been around so long. We tried to save Brook Farm. We put it on the ballot. We lost Brook Farm, and the developer said that the taxpayers would net $90,000 of school taxes from Brook Farm because only 5 or 6 kids would go to Radnor schools. Well, we're not netting anything because a lot of people in Brook Farm send their kids to Radnor schools because they're really good schools. They don't go to private schools. So development and the whole study of development doesn't net you. It increases your expenses. It isn't a net gain on residential development.
I want to bring a little attention to some other pieces of the report that I thought were helpful. The biggest one for me is the deficit. We've run deficits for the last 3 years. In 2010, we're expected to see a $3.8 million deficit if you count all funds. And that's a big number. And I think it was 3 years ago when I first joined the board, I did a projection. I said we're going to need a 26% tax increase in 2010. And I didn't know what was coming. That was before the recession hit. So I saw issues then, and now we're looking, I think, what is the number that you've given us for the projected tax increase if we do nothing in terms of reducing expenses?
We didn't calculate that.
Okay. The number's huge.
It is.
It's about 10% for every $1 million of deficit. 10% for every $1 million of deficit. So we're looking at a 38% tax increase to balance the budget. That's absurd. We can't do that. I say that every year. We can't do that, but we have to act. We have to do something. Last year, we did cut staff by 18 employees. We reduced our operating expense by $1.4 million. We did have to raise taxes 11%, but we still spent about, I forget now, $2.5 million of our fund balance to balance the budget last year. At the end of this year, we'll have about $1 million left over at the end of the year. However, we spend about $1.5 million a month, and because our taxes, our real estate taxes don't come in until late in the spring, we will have a major deficit in the first 3 months of next year. So we have some really tough decisions to make, and I think we're going to hope the public comes out and supports us in those tough decisions, because it's not going to be easy. I don't want to have to cut jobs. I don't want to have to cut programs. But when you're faced with a deficit of this magnitude, you don't have a lot of choices. So we appreciate the report because it gives us choices. It gives a lot of great choices. So that's all I have to say now. Thank you.
Sarah and the team, first, thank you very much for the comprehensive report. I just have a few questions, and since they're on the report, I'm just going to sort of flip through it sequentially. One that I found interesting, and I don't know if it's sort of a weakness in the choice of wording or a lack of understanding, and if it's a lack of understanding, it may have implications for the fire department and their fundraising. But the township doesn't provide the fire service. We provide a contribution. And it
Kevin,
says,
you want to give me a page number? Is
I'm
that
on page
particular?
4.
Okay.
And it's 1, 2, 3, the third bullet point in. It says township services such as police, fire. So do you think it was just less than ideal choice of wording, or do you think there's a lack of understanding? Because if I recall correctly, I think somebody said in the past that something like only 30% of the residents contribute to the fire department. And if you think your tax dollars are funding the fire department, that might be a perfectly natural reaction. So again, I just want to, if you don't have an answer, you don't have an answer. I'm just trying to, understand the
May I
context.
speak, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a number of community agencies that receive funding. We have a library that receives funding. And those are nonprofit organizations. The fire company also provides services in partnership with the township. So perhaps in the way we talked about it as a committee, we recognize that the township has a partnership with a number of different community organizations, the fire company being one of them. It has its own line item in the budget as well. So perhaps our way we worded it gives the impression that we think it's a township-managed organization when it is not. But we do have a partnership where we assist them in funding, including fire companies outside of the township. Recently, you all had to vote on helping fund the reconstruction of the Bryn Mawr Fire Company's floor, as I recall. So clearly we have partnerships, and there's obligations expected of Radnor Township citizens to help finance fire services. So that's why we use that language. Perhaps we could have been more precise.
Yeah, and I believe that was also at the point where we were buying a new fire truck. Okay. I think there was a $600,000 capital outlay from the township for the fire truck, so that was why.
I found the survey highly interesting. I know it's not random. I know it's not a scientific survey. Were there any protections to prevent somebody from responding more than once, or did you just rely on that and hope that nobody took that much time and effort out of their day other than to do it once?
No, there weren't any protections. There are methods to do it. We used it, actually set it up through SurveyMonkey, which is an online survey service. So we could have selected that, but we left it open knowingly that allowed anybody. It's essentially an honor system.
Okay.
I would say, Kevin, there were 740 respondents, 340 38 unique comments written.
Yeah, I doubt people
I
took
don't,
I just
yeah,
want to
it-
understand more than
Yep.
anything else.
I don't believe there was any sort of nefarious activity with the survey.
No, I don't think so either. I suspected that. John Rice, the comment on page 11, and you don't need to refer specifically to the page, about the payments in lieu of taxes and the per student fee. Is that something that has to be voluntarily negotiated with the institutions, or do we have any ability to assess, impose, whatever the right word is, that fee? Because they do. The students do use our services. And I know that the institutions think they contribute, but I'm just trying to understand our options for the future.
That's on your agenda for some discussion later on tonight, but a pilot is something that's typically negotiated. We're talking about real estate taxes. I don't know any place in this state that assesses a fee, a flat fee. Pitt, I think, tried to do it in their budget last year. The mayor proposed it, but I don't think it was ever passed by the city. So it's going to be a state law issue in terms of whether you can impose something, but there's a lot of municipalities that negotiate pilots with hospitals, with schools, with other normally tax-exempt institutions. So we just started talking about it, the staff, in the last week or so, and there's a couple of options, I think, there that we can explore going forward.
Okay. Question on page 12, it's just the bottom of page 12. You say if 20% of the participants in youth sports are non-residents, is that just a number you picked, or is that based on any kind of?
No, based on interviewing township staff.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of science behind that number. Okay.
At least math.
Okay, that's fine. There's one in here that I found very problematic. I haven't gotten to it yet, so I think it's my next comment. It's on page 24. Again, I don't know if it's wording. I don't know if it's a reaction based on my background. But on item 4, you make a statement that our audited financial statements may have been materially misstated. We have an opinion, I believe, from the auditors that say they are not. So again, is that a less than ideal choice of wording, or do you have some kind of rationale for making that statement that brings into question the audited financial statements we have?
The rationale is written in there, but if we can talk about it further, if you'd like, here, or I don't think it's poorly used words.
Have you had a
Kevin?
conversation with them about that statement, Bill?
Yeah, we reviewed, yes, we
And
did.
have you had-
In compiling the data that the group needed to put together their recommendations, we did find some differences in terms of the valuation of some of our land and assets in our audited financial statements. So that'll be something that we'll be working with our auditors on and reviewing.
Do you think it's materially misstated? If you don't want to
I'm
answer
not in a
that-
position to sit here tonight and
Okay.
tell you one way or another. It will be something that we'll present to our auditors.
Kevin, if I may, on behalf of the committee that worked on the land, particularly the land issues, we were very careful in our choice of wording in this section. I was very careful to bring to Mr. Zinkowski's attention that the township could not locate, almost half of the records on the tax folios. The records were the historical records were in unacceptable condition. We were actually very surprised at the condition of the data that we
I
received.
understand all of that, but again,
And-
it concerns me greatly
It should- yeah,
when we have audited financial statements that have an opinion that says they're not, they represent fairly. I think that's the word that gets used anymore.
Kevin, back when we reviewed the audits, the auditors, and we discussed at this meeting the fact that our asset valuation was understated.
That doesn't mean they're material.
No, I agree. I'm just saying, that's what
And
we
this
discussed
only
that.
affects the cost basis on those assets,
Right.
not the current value
To
of
say
those
they're
assets.
materially misstated
It sounds somebody's
is-
in trouble.
is at least in my view of the world, a significant choice of wording that needs to be investigated.
You're correct, Kevin.
Okay.
And it will be.
Okay. The other one I was surprised at this one. I actually pulled the audit report, that it wasn't cited as, by our auditors, that we don't have a fixed asset tagging system?
That was a recommendation
None,
from
none
the
that we've been able to recognize.
And I don't remember
That was
being-
identified by the auditors.
That was
I think it
identified
two
by the
orders.
auditors in
Yeah.
2002,
But
3,
it wasn't,
4, 5,
it wasn't in
and
the most recent one that I saw. Now, maybe I looked at it too quickly and missed it. But if you could just double check on that one.
6. Yeah,
Well, I think as
Because
part
it-
of this too, that we're putting together a report for the Board of Commissioners that actually specify all the citations, how long they've been citations that have been out there. And this way, the Board of Commissioners can actually go through almost as a checkoff point to see which ones.
I mean, we
what the
had talked about that
process
when
is.
we got the audit report about putting together the list of actions and the time and, an action point. My last one is one that has sort of personal significance to me, only because it personally frustrates me. Because I pay 1% income tax to where I work, and I spend about 5 minutes in the town getting off the road and driving there, and I pay way more than I get back. And I was curious, because I've been told that if Radnor institutes a tax, my money gets redirected to Radnor.
That's correct.
Which I would much prefer, because I get a hell of a lot more from Radnor than I get there. But I recognize that, if the vast majority of people in the township aren't paying that, then that's not the thing to do. But if 99% of the people pay a 1% income tax and it's redirected to Radnor, it might be. Do you have any sense as to what percent of the people are like me, paying 1% income
that-
tax to other townships?
I'm that person too, Kevin, and I understand your frustration to that extent. There is a study that was done. It was performed by Berkheimer. Berkheimer is a tax collection agency, so you have to understand that when you read the report. I'm sure that is available through township staff for you. We did not
I
spend
found
a
it
lot of time.
surprisingly low when I saw that, because, and maybe there was a way the question is, but I know I've been told that Philadelphia doesn't get redirected to Radnor.
Right.
But I remember the number being extraordinarily low, like in the 20 or 30%, which really surprised me. I mean, I was just wondering if there was better data out there.
There's been a couple local studies on this particular issue and the level of acceptance by Radnor residents of this, because if you work out of your home, for instance, in Radnor, or there are people who live and work in Radnor, so that in and of itself would be a great project for another citizens group. I mean, that is a huge undertaking to understand all of the implications of putting in an EIT and what that would do to your business revenue. We collect business privilege tax. And
I wouldn't want it to put it in it,
you'd
but
have to
if
understand.
90, look,
Yeah.
if 99% of the people are already paying it, it's going elsewhere. Let's get our fair share. But if
Well,
50% of the people are paying it, then let's not.
Yeah, well,
go
that's
down that path.
the issue has always been, when it's been brought up, that 18% of the people work in Philadelphia, so they wouldn't have to pay it. 25% are senior citizens, so it would get down to like 55% or 50% of the people paying it, Kevin. That's why we've never looked at it seriously.
Thank you. I think you've addressed all my questions.
Can I just add a quick comment about that? If you do decide to seriously look at the IT, when you compare Radnor to other townships in the region, recognize that many of them have an EIT, so their real estate tax is going to be significantly lower than ours because they rely on the EIT. And so the idea would be that if you did use an EIT, using Berkheimer's numbers, you might get 10 million, but you wouldn't need to have the property tax at the rate it is currently. You could actually reduce property taxes by adopting an EIT. It's like a tax shift to a different way of income being generated. So it's a complex question. It would take some careful thought to see if it's right to do in Radnor. We chose not to make a recommendation on revenues like that, property tax or EIT. We leave that up to you all to sort through.
I have a couple of questions and comments. Item number 2 of your top 5 recommendations, the range of numbers you put in is $140,000 to $160,000 for payments in lieu of taxes. What was the analysis that you performed that you arrived at that range?
We got statistics from each of those universities as to their resident headcount times $20. So that's how many students are living in Radnor Township while they're here at school.
On
times the
campus.
$20. On campus.
Living on campus.
Living on
And
campus.
did you make any determination or analysis of what other communities are charging or attempting to charge, or attempting to work out or negotiate a payment in lieu of taxes, I should say?
It varies dramatically. Most universities do not pay pilots around the country. Pittsburgh does, Notre Dame does, Princeton does, and it's really negotiated, as your solicitor pointed out, as to what those fees would be and what they're for. Usually there's something related to what you're asking them to pay. We recognize that the universities do pay for police services, although we make a recommendation. I mean, when I say that, I mean for special events, like graduation weekend, what have you. We do recommend in there that you charge the full cost rather than estimate 30% for benefits that you currently do. The benefit actually is like 60, is it 70? 70. So you might want to change your fees there, but in terms of the pilot, it really would vary dramatically by community and university. So that's it. We put an option in there. There are other ways to look at the possibility of a pilot, but that was just one way our group deliberated and thought it might be helpful.
And the next question on that subject is, why did you limit the institutions to Eastern, Cabrini, and Villanova? And why not consider all of the private educational institutions in the township and/or churches? Why not them?
This was for students living on campus, so that was the analysis that we did, that these are people who come into the community from other communities, live on campus, take advantage of township services, as opposed to the churches.
Well, you have a Sacred Heart Academy, Notre Dame, people from outside of the township come in, utilize township services, the roads, et cetera. Why wouldn't you consider that? Archbishop Carroll.
Well, none of them have overnight students, so this was specifically for on-campus resident students, and that's the analysis that we did.
Okay,
Yeah.
appreciate that. With regard to the 9 recommended parcels for sale, there was I guess this is page number 10, you list reasons for Radnor Township's prior purchase, and you have reasons specified for 8 of the 9. What was the source of your information for that? Because I'm not sure it's really complete.
Some prior documents. One source was, and it was not a township document, but I think it was Citizens Protecting Radnor document on their webpage.
Citizens Protecting Radnor document?
CPR, Citizens.
You probably know it
Protecting
better than I know it, but I have it in my file if you want me to thumb through the page.
When we were doing the $20 million referendum.
There's a PDF file on the website. I think it's. You want me to check?
You can get back to me on that.
Sure.
And the last item I have, and it's probably your number 1 recommendation, which I think is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that is a recommendation that there be a cost reduction of 8% vis-a-vis the employees of this township in both this year and next year. Do you envision that 8% reduction in expenses will come at the expense of actual jobs to the staff? And if so, what's the estimated number?
Okay. Based on our research and the comparative data that was available, it appeared as though that meaningful savings needs to come from a reduction in the cost of benefits being provided. So we didn't approach our calculations specifically looking at headcount reductions, but obviously it is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and we have to figure this thing out. So we made suggestions in the report. Negotiate reductions in wages and benefits, obviously, number 1. The use of privatized workforces performing existing township services. I believe you guys have sent out an RFP for trash collection, school district, grounds maintenance, et cetera, and correct sizing of staff. And we leave that to the department heads to figure out, analyze, and make sure that the programs are properly staffed.
So
Thank you.
You would anticipate that if we were to go through with something like that, that there would be a reduction in the size of staff. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I mean, it's there. And I think that we ought to have that discussion. If not tonight, then some other night.
We did not do detailed analysis with regards to the coverage that each particular department was providing the township with. We do not know if these departments are properly staffed, understaffed, overstaffed. We believe that that should be decided by you, the board, working in conjunction with the department heads.
One of the difficulties in arriving at any answer, any prescribed answer, was when you go back into some of the other process and procedural and policy recommendations. There is no updated employee manual. There is no programmatic budget. There's no way to tie costs to services. So it was really difficult to come back with a specific prescribed answer. But there was clearly costs that seemed to be out of line. So that's what we were looking at. But one of the problems of all our work was the lack of data. Every time we would go back to look for some specific detailed data, it was either non-existent or missing or rather poor. So that's one of the issues that we had in trying to get to specific answers. That's why it's pretty wide
I appreciate
open.
the limitations that you're operating under. I just wanted to make sure that you aren't specifically recommending that an 8% cut occur. That's a target number, I think, you're telling me, which we have to work through in terms of analysis with the staff and so on. Is that, am I correct in that?
Yeah.
If you look at the numbers closely, you'll find that an 8% reduction each year in total employee expenses equates roughly to a 50% reduction in the cost of benefits. So there was some application, of mathematics to come to that total 8% reduction cost.
All right. And again, I echo my fellow board members' comments, appreciating the work that you've done. It obviously took an awful lot of time to put this thing together, and it is advisory and recommendations to us, and we're the ones, unfortunately, that have to bite the bullet and the buck stops here and all that business. But the work you've done is tremendous, so thank you very much for your efforts.
Commissioner Mahoney, can I come back to, I'll get the answer now, just
Yes,
to
sir.
kill it or cure it. Citizens to Preserve Radnor, there was a document that had some of the reasons, and in that document, for example, one of the 9 reasons is the same reason that Commissioner Schaefer and Commissioner Spengler mentioned. To contrast that, one of the other 9 parcels, Plant Avenue Park, in interviewing the township people, nobody knew the answer to that one, just to compare and contrast as an example.
Yeah, well, I mean, going back to the Levin tract, I mean, obviously, the precipitating factor was a developer coming in saying he wanted to put up townhouses or single-family houses, I guess it was, all over that property. And we determined after some analysis that the watershed down to the Levin tract is huge. And without that tract being there to absorb a lot of the water and let it off very slowly into the Little Darby Creek, there'd be some very serious environmental problems there if a housing development had gone in. So there were other reasons beyond preventing a development from going in there. The Leeming tract is another example. You have listed here to prevent a specific housing development. Very often in open space acquisition, we run into a situation where a developer has found an opportunity to develop property, but we determine that there are other reasons for preserving that property. And with regard to Leeming, it was, let's think long-term in terms of the trail. Can we get a trail extension from Radnor Street Road over to, Radnor Road over to the Leeming tract? And the answer was yes, eventually we probably could. And perhaps that could be the eastern terminus with a parking lot for the trail. And so our thinking was, let's think long-term on that acquisition and how does it fit in with our trail plans? So that was really the reason we did that. Very often, though, the precipitating factor is the developer will get that opportunity before we do, and then we have to react accordingly, which is why open space acquisition is such a balancing act.
Yeah, I agree. I understand the complexity of open space acquisition. And some of the things you're mentioning actually kind of speak to the land acquisition management page in here on process. If, for example, there were a position paper, if you will, as part of the process on taking in land to the township, I almost envision that there's like a closing binder that you go to. You find out, why do we buy this? Why do we have it? But there isn't that now. So the best we've come up with is hours of research, hours of interviewing, and we come up with this. I think you raise good points. Not for me to say right or wrong. That's for the citizens to determine and the commissioners to determine.
Right. All right. Thanks again.
Anything done? Just to help you with the history, the Fifth Ward Park was bought Kazanjian when he built Cornerstone and given to the township. That park is probably 80% wetlands, and it's adjacent to a vital stream corridor. And I believe it, and I asked Matt to look into this. I think it was actually a condition of the approval of the Cornerstone's development. So again, it poses some very, somebody's phone. So we have to evaluate the legality of that sale, given the conditions where it came from. And Plant Avenue, that's a stormwater issue.
All that
Yeah.
all that
No, I'm
makes
just
sense.
giving
Yeah,
you the information
sure.
so you can add it.
And I think if you're continuing this CBFAC or you're doing things to explore these things further, there are talented people willing to give their energy to help out with this.
One of the other observations I had when I read the report, it made me very happy, because obviously we hired the right guys when we hired Bob and Bill, because they were already thinking down the road of some of the wonderful recommendations you've given us. John Rice, you indicated to me earlier that you might have had some concerns when you went through this, or some issues that we need to be sensitive to.
Well, I don't think for purposes of tonight, I mean, the only issues have already come up in terms of negotiating payments in lieu of, and how do we go about doing that. The other issue, I think John and Elaine and Bill have brought up in terms of open space. I mean, it's a complicated issue to sell off any kind of township-owned land, whether it's open space or a township building or a police station. And given the land records that aren't here, and I'm well aware that there's records that aren't here because I've looked for many of the records over the last year and a half, and it's difficult to construct, at least on some of these, how the land was acquired, whether there were any additional restrictions, if there's federal money involved, state money involved. We need to analyze all of that so the board's got that information. And, I mean, Bob and I have already started doing some of that. So they're my only issues in this report, John, at this point. I think the report's great. There's a lot of things I've observed over the last year and a half that I've been talking to your current manager about and your previous manager about, and this is a nice roadmap going forward.
Thank you. We'll have some public questions, but what I'd like to ask, if there's a whole bunch of you with a similar question, get together and just have it asked one time. And I probably will limit the time for this part to 15 or 20 minutes. So whoever would like to come up. And address your questions to the CBFAC, please.
Bob Mikolas, West Wayne Avenue.
Jim Cornelio, Barclayton Road, Garrett Hill.
I'm the president of Radnor Athletic Association. I'm also the program director for the winter basketball program for Radnor Township Parks and Recreation Program. I just want to make a couple comments with respect to, I'll say, which is a fairly minor cost item in the overall report. I don't know where the 20% number came from that Mr. Higgins asked for, but the numbers I have are less than 100 non-residents that play on fields. So it's like a non-issue. It's about whether you collect it or don't collect it. It's not a big deal. It's only about $1,500. The other comment I wanted to make was relative to the survey, which singled out the winter recreation programs. This program is going into its 22nd year in Radnor Township. I've been the director of that program for the whole time period, for the whole 22 years. We started out with 120 kids playing basketball, and now we're up to 1,266 kids playing basketball, plus a lot of volunteers that coach the kids. That program takes in average about $100 a kid, so you do the math, it's over $1,200, $120,000 for that program. And the costs are just what we have to pay for a couple gyms that we rent. We rent, I think, in 3 facilities we rent. And then the kids just get T-shirts, and each team gets 1 basketball. So it's not a high-cost program, but I think in designing a survey that focuses on winter program, of which that's the biggest of the winter programs by far, that it's just not fair to have a survey go to residents without the complete information. So you have a program that makes a lot of money that's being asked for citizens to fill out a survey and say, oh, we don't want that program. Well, the program makes a lot of money, so what's the sense of, asking the question? Jim, did you want to say anything?
No, I would just echo that. I think it's the most successful program in the township. It turns over, I don't know whether is anyone here from Parks and Rec? It's a moneymaker for the township. We have a conservative estimate, $120,000, and I think my guess would be $50,000 goes back to the township after paying the costs. So it's not costing the township any money. It's making money for the township.
May I make a comment or not?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Sure. We designed the survey to list services, and when Philip introduced the survey earlier in the presentation, we did discuss trying to put in information, but it would become unwieldy. So we had a cover letter that accompanied the survey that explained the financial conditions facing our community, but we didn't explain all the different services. And when we looked at recreation programs in all seasons, you're right, almost all of them do actually cover their costs. So if you look at the recommendations that we did put in there, it focuses on, I think, 2 programs that are losing money that we recommended terminating, and the general principle being that a recreation program that isn't at least meeting its cost, consider not offering that program. But those that are, leave them alone, because they generate revenue. So I hope that clarifies.
I'd like to make one other comment. Thank you, Craig. The recommendation to charge non-resident players a little bit more because they're enjoying the facilities that the Radnor residents support, to your point, it may only be $1,500, but I would still recommend you collect it. Part of the problem here in Radnor is I see a lot of conversations that are, it's only $1,200. We're going to waive that fee. It's only $800. And it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's a good policy. Have the policy, collect the money, charge a little bit more for people who are coming from outside the community, and it's still a valid recommendation.
Yeah, we don't have any problem with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not trying to solve the issues, it's just we want to hear the concerns, and again, it's not a debate, it's just information exchange. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, how are you tonight? My name is Bill Cassidy. I'm an employee of Radnor Township for the past 24 years. I have a question about one of the comments that's in your report here. It's on page 14 and 15, and it says that the CBFAC believes that the township is paying a rate beyond the skill set or educational level required for many of the positions within our township. That may be true in the educational department as far as college degrees go, but as far as skill sets go, I will put all the guys I work with against any other township. Our skill level is above and beyond what the level that actually our pay scale is paying us. So thank you, Commissioner Mahoney, for asking about the 8% cut. We're all unsure if that is a rate cut or an employee cut, okay? Now, we don't know what you guys based your you know, what your bottom line was or anything, but did you happen to take into considerations any of the hazards of our job? Because I've listed some things here of the hazards of our job, okay? You know, on a daily basis, men are constantly around heavy equipment, giant blades going, you know, we're not talking about paper cuts here. We're talking about losing your limbs, losing your life, okay? There's needles sticking out of things guys collect, okay? There's that aspect. Then, a lot of times, we're the first call on the defense against a problem in the township. We got trees down, storms, there's power lines zapping all around. Our men are out there, okay? You gentlemen, ladies, are all home, hoping your power doesn't go off. Don't let me be the one with the power off. And we're out there trying to make sure that doesn't happen, okay? Then we move into the snow removal, which is above and beyond any other township around here. You know, everybody says when you go into Radnor, you know you're in Radnor. That's because we, as a team, dedicate, you know. You're home with your families and stuff. We're working, and that's fine and everything, but we're on call the whole entire winter. Thanksgiving dinners come. We don't really, sometimes you can't make plans because you might have to work. Christmas, you also may have to work, okay? We're trying to do a good job. To just be put under as get a decrease right away and tried. We never thought we were part of the problem, but it seems like we're part of we are the solution because we're getting hammered. We're getting hammered hard. And like I said, 24 years I committed to this township, and I will continue to work here, and I love this place, and I love the guys I work with, okay? But I think you guys as a group should recognize the hazards. I mean, there's a lot of bad things. We have confined spaces we work in. There's trench work that gets done. You know, the hot, the cold. They tell you watch the news in the morning, they tell you, heat accessory. Don't do anything manual. These gentlemen are putting down 400-degree blacktop, okay? There's hazards.
Excuse me.
So to say our skill level
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's just, we all appreciate what you're doing. We all have a deep
and I
knowledge.
thank you for that.
More, I think it
Well,
would probably be,
everybody-
I think it would be much more appropriate that we ask the CBFAC to provide additional data that compares you to other,
Well, that'd be fine. I wanted
I mean, that's the way we should be looking at this is,
because
and
I
other
don't
public,
feel that
not private.
We've been given
If
the-
I
the
may also,
proper-
Bill,
Yeah.
if I may also comment that this advisory board is an advisory board. They provided information to us, but this is not the only piece of
Well,
information.
I'm trying to make aware, as you did with your open space,
Absolutely.
correct?
Yeah.
You did
And
with open space.
Bill-
Open space, and you talked about the men. You talked about another thing. I'm just trying to make them aware, and the public who are watching this, that we have a tough job. So to just use us and to knock down, you know, you're going after the insurance, okay, the pay, the amount of people we've lost, okay, and now we're going to continue to give you the service that you're paying for, and we're happy with that. But just don't treat us like we don't matter, excuse me, because we do matter. Thank you.
And we thank you for your hard work. Any further? In that case, I want to thank you very much for your hard work and all the hours you put in, and we're having a lot of more conversations, I'm sure.
The CBFAC's welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting, but if you don't want to, we'll understand. Okay, folks, we're going to move on. I had missed
previously the announcement of our executive session. We were talking about real estate matters and township-owned properties. We were also talking about the ongoing litigation that you're all aware of, and also some issues with staffing and the interviews that are being conducted for a new police superintendent, and also some considerations of a human resources person. Next item, a discussion by the township manager regarding college university impact on Radnor Township services. See, the CB fact should have stayed. Good.
Sure. I'll keep this brief. One of the things looking at in the past 5.5 months, trying to get, I know my arms, and I think the administration's arms around the operation here, and looking at all the various services and the structure of the taxes of how they're all set up. I think one thing jumps off the page, and I think that's the impact of the college and universities upon the township. When you look at some of the data that's been provided for calls of service directly to the college and universities, the public works area in which we maintain some of the areas around the colleges and universities, community development, and the calls for services that they have. Approximately, it's estimated that those expenses just between community development, public works, and police are estimated around $2.2 million of service that is provided from the township, in which there are no property taxes paid by any of those institutions. We are working on the fire EMS, their percentages, their calls of service that we have. I know from the Radnor Fire Company, we just got late this afternoon. It's approximately anywhere between 10 and 12% of their calls go to the college and universities. So one of the things that we are looking at here is, how do we address these situations? But again, that $2.2 million is, again, being covered by the residents of this township and the businesses of those townships who pay property taxes, in which that burden, in my opinion, is being shifted from those areas to the residents and the businesses. So what we are looking for this evening here is for the board to authorize myself and the solicitor to work through in further detail and come back to the board of what we can look at here and trying at the various costs, looking at the payment in lieu of taxes, which I believe there may be legal issues in regards to that, but also of options that we would be able to pursue and present to the Board of Commissioners for further review and consideration.
Other options meaning impact fees of some sort.
We could look at them in certain ways.
That would be one thing we would have to look at. I mean, there's very limited authority for that. What can the municipality, what can Radnor do as a home rule municipality that some other home rule municipalities are doing? So there's a wide variety of things here, including looking at the tax-exempt properties and how they're actually being used. And again, it's going to come back to probably a pilot, payment in lieu of taxes, and what's fair. I think all the commissioners probably know there's a lot of service provided to the universities. I don't know whether all the properties of the universities have been determined to be tax exempt. I suspect they have been. Is that appropriate in all cases? So this is something I just really started to look at last week, and I've got a couple other thoughts that if the board wants to go down this path, that I think the board needs to authorize us to do that.
Is that 2.2 figure from the universities, the higher education universities only? That's not including the lower level education?
Correct, and that's where Commissioner Mahoney spoke about those particular areas too, that we would make this all-inclusive as well.
We would look at being more encompassing.
Correct.
Do you need a motion from us, or just a sense individually of?
I think we'd like a motion.
Well,
to
I move
authorize us
to
pursue
I
that.
move to have administration pursue this issue. This is definitely an issue for my ward. I get the police reports every week for my ward, and they grow exponentially when the colleges open their doors in the fall.
Let's see if there's a second then. I'll second it. Very good. Is there public comment on the issue?
Well, I'll finish commenting. Just in this police department review for this month, there's probably close to 100 incidents that the police responded to. What I want to differentiate is while the institutions are tax exempt, the students are not. And this is a situation where the students through their actions, are putting a burden on the neighborhoods, they're putting a burden on the residents, they're putting a burden on staff, and we have to recoup that cost somehow. We have to not only recoup the cost, but we also have to have an impact on that behavior. We had in fact, I think it was Saturday night, there was an altercation in front of my house that involved 5 students. There was a burglary involved in this issue, and there were a lot of police on my street, and it's a big impact on the community. And I don't want to pick on Villanova because they're not the only institution, but they're one of the largest, and they have one of the largest impacts. So I'm all in favor of recouping some of these costs and just holding them accountable and holding those students accountable for their behavior in the community and making sure that we cover the cost of those services.
Sure, and if I can just add to that, again, we're very fortunate to have these institutions here within the township. I mean, they are definitely an asset, but you have to look at the financial aspect of this and the impact of those institutions upon this community and the services in which we're charged to provide. And when you look at that disparity, in my opinion, you're shifting that burden to residents and to businesses instead of looking at something as an even spread of those expenses. So that's one of the items that we'll be working with the solicitor on.
Well, they're tax exempt for a reason, the way churches and schools and all, is because they're a benefit and asset to the community. And a decision was made a long time ago to help them flourish in our communities because they provide a lot to our communities that, to help them grow, that they don't pay the taxes. And they're tax exempt, just like the utilities companies. We're not going after utility companies and different people. Talking to the universities over the years, payment in lieu of taxes, I don't think they'll ever go for. Their solicitors have told them that that's like paying a tax, and that would jeopardize their tax-free status. So you might have to come up with another philosophy, because we've discussed this over and over again over the years. My thinking and discussion with the universities, they're willing to contribute to Radnor Township if we have a special project they could support. And maybe we should talk to them about helping us buy the fire equipment. There's other ways than just coming up with something that looks like a tax. If we sat down with them, because the problem is that in the 20-some years that I've been a commissioner in this second round, everybody always said, let's do this to the community, let's do this, we come up with different taxes. But we've never really sat down with the universities, and had a clear discussion and said, okay, what can we do? How can we do this? We came up with a tax on each student, 5, 10 years ago, didn't fly in the whole business. But I think we ought to sit down with the universities first and sit and talk with them and lay out all the expenses to them and tell them we need some help and where can they help us. And I think that, they might be able to help us to fund a piece of fire equipment. The problem with the Bryn Mawr thing, there are things that we can do that we can get the money that we need, that we need to help us do that affects our budget, without a payment in lieu of taxes or a head tax on students. So that's the area that I like to go in. If that fails, then maybe we'll have to look at other things. But I look at Eastern and Cabrini and Villanova and Valley Forge and Notre Dame and Sacred Heart and St. Catherine's and every other. I'm proud of them, and they're an asset to my community. And you can always point out there's problems. Every time somebody tells me, well, I got a problem in Ravenscliff or Round Hill or Invery, there are people problems. There are no students there, but we have police problems and we have other situations. So we can't lay it all on the students, because I can tell you one thing in my living in this community, the thing that has impressed me the most is the quality of the students that come from other parts of the country and live in our community. I'm not saying that 100% of them are perfect, but they are outstanding individuals that come to our community and contribute a lot. So I don't want to get on the universities anyway. I'm very proud of the universities and the students we have here in Radnor Township. But I think we can work with them, discuss our budget problems, and I think we can come up with something that's agreeable to everyone.
Sure. Maybe just to add, if I could, just 2 points. Villanova University, to my understanding, donated $2,500 to the Bryn Mawr floor. That means the township's still on the hook for $148,000, dollars for that. So again, when you look at the balance there, but I think also you bring up a good point is in regards to the public utilities, because again, when lines come down, there's infrastructure that goes. who's out there protecting the lines and the services, either between public services or out there protecting those. And again, too, those are something that I'd be more than happy to look at, because again, too, it impacts our ability to respond and do our jobs, because we have to babysit power lines that are down or water breaks. Again, too, there's an expense that we're absorbing, the township is absorbing, which I think all out of this whole thing is, I think we're trying to look to be fair. We're not trying to take advantage of anyone here, but I think it should be a point to where it's fair. And I think it's fair that, again, we look at these particular items, because again, too, that burden has been shifted completely on the back of the taxpayers, of the residents and the businesses.
Well, what percentage?
And that's my
What
opinion.
percentage of the taxes are paid by the residents of Radnor Township? 25%. Of all our income, how much comes from their taxes?
The majority of our.
No, it's not the majority.
It's something like, I thought it was like,
Real estate.
yeah, I thought it
Was
was
it
like
30%?
We collect
Bill's
pro-
talking about property taxes.
Yeah, property tax. What percentage of the property tax of our total income?
About 30%.
30%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 70% comes from elsewhere. So not all the services that are provided in Radnor Township are falling on the Radnor Township residents. The businesses pay, the people, the transfer tax, there's a lot of different things that add up to, the mercantile tax. You got to remember that all those students, they buy things in our community and pay a tax that way. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into, so to say they're not, paying taxes and everything's falling on Radnor residents, yeah, 30% of our tax bill falls on me and my property. But I get 100% of the services. So, we have to look at it that way too.
Bob, I think you ought to look at everything and anything. One of the reasons we brought you here is to take a fresh look at everything. And I will support you in looking at everything. Whether or not I want to implement it is a different question.
Any further commissioner comment? Any public comment on the issue?
At this time, I'd like to introduce Colonel Church.
Sir?
You have
would
to introduce yourself first.
Identify yourself, please.
Introduce yourself first.
My name is Bill Smith. We're here to talk with you tonight, but as far as this part, I'd like to introduce you to Colonel Smith, the president, Colonel Church, the president of Valley Forge Military College.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lieutenant Colonel John Church. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I'm the president of Valley Forge Military College.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I'm told to tell you it's public participation. We want to give back to the community, ironically, on November 11th in the form of the Veterans Day celebration. And one of the things we were hoping to do was to facilitate some fundraising for our wounded warriors. And to that end, we wanted to replicate the success you may have seen recently in the community with regard to some of the students from Penn State that are raising money for cancer awareness. And we want to replicate the same events in conjunction with the events that have been prescribed by the Bateman Gallagher American Legion Post 688. So I asked for your permission to do that. It's a pilot program for us to see if that's going to be a functional way. We want to raise awareness with some of our wounded veterans.
Excuse me, Colonel, is that outside the scope of this particular item? We're here just to
But
discuss.
why don't we just finish this up since we're here? We're just about done this.
If it is, I apologize,
Yeah,
and I'll
that's all
retract
right.
my statement.
No, go ahead.
But we're not going to authorize any permission now. We're going to finish.
No, we don't authorize permission. They talk to the chief of police and get permission from the
Okay, well, I'm going to.
Please. Go ahead,
You want me
please.
to do this? Yeah? My request would be that you bring it up under public participation.
I thought that's what we were doing right now.
No, we're still in item 4. We have a vote to take. Sorry about that, Colonel.
That's all
It's
right.
public comment on item 4. Sorry for the
Although it's
confusion.
somewhat related.
And we thank you for paying $18,000 a year in lieu of taxes
Yeah,
for years. We
I mean,
appreciate that.
If you had a comment about that particular item, about the impact or prospective impact fees on the institutions, now would be the time. But we're
We
focused
would welcome
just
the
on.
opportunity to engage in the dialogue to see how we best jointly go forward with regards to the concerns that were raised by Mr. Zinkowski. I appreciate that very much.
Very good.
He'll
Thank
be
you.
over at 9 o'clock tomorrow to discuss the payment in lieu of taxes with you.
Happy to take his appointment.
Right, and sorry about the confusion
No, that's
on the
quite all right.
particular
Thank you
item.
very much. Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Colonel. Okay, any other public comment on that particular item? Very good. There's been a motion and a second to have direct the manager to assess economic impact of the institutions and provide options to us. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, now we do public participation, and I'd like to ask you to be the first person.
I'm going to get this right. All right. I'm still John Church, and I'm still the president of college.
Hasn't changed.
Hasn't changed in the last 3 seconds.
Are you sure?
I'm damn sure. Hey, we appreciate all you do for us. On November 11th, we're going to be working with the folks from Bateman Gallagher to commemorate November 11th. And one of the things we're going to do actually is help them clean up the graveyard. And someone talked to me about that and asked if the cadets would be willing to do that. And we talked to them, and they said they would be willing to do that. We have Civil War veterans in some of our grave sites here in Radnor, and it's pretty amazing to me. And we just don't feel comfortable walking away from that commitment. So we're going to support the American Legion Post. We're glad to do it. Happy to be here, and looking forward to November 11th. Any support that we could garner from the township going forward. During our 75th year in the community, the college is 75 years old this year, and we're very proud to be here.
Have you met Ted Pollard, the Radnor Historical Society, in the back row?
We've been having folks talk to him, and we're going to help him on that day
The
as well.
cemetery project,
Yep,
right.
exactly.
Great.
And we're going to fan out in the community, and then, of course, join our good friends from Bateman Gallagher for the 11th hour, the 11th day, the 11th month to commemorate at the Radnor War Memorial. So very excited about that. Appreciate your support.
Now, how does Penn State get permission to go in the corners and collect money?
They did not receive permission from the township.
So they just
And
can
they
go
did
and
that on
do
the
it?
weekend. So I think by them coming forward, I can commend them for doing that. And I think with the solicitor, it would be appropriate to entertain a motion to allow them to do this.
And that would be on the 11th of November? Do we have a meeting before then? No. Okay, well, I'll move the approval.
Oh, yes, November 8th.
Second.
Yeah,
Yeah, we did, November 8th.
November 8th.
Well,
Let's move right now.
I'll do it now. I'll move it.
All right. It's moved,
Second.
seconded. Any discussion by the commissioners? Any public discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Again,
Any
thank you for
opposed?
your consideration.
Okay.
And forgive my clumsiness.
Thank you, Colonel.
And thank you for the last 30 years giving us $18,000 in lieu of taxes. We appreciate it.
Glad to do it. Glad to do it. Thank you.
But more important, thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Dominic Demitis. I want to talk briefly.
Where do you live, Dominic?
214 North Aberdeen. I'm here with a group of people. We want to talk briefly about the C1A proposal with the West Wayne business area. A couple of comments in regards to the meeting. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Curley and Mr. Bauman and Bob Skowski for their time putting forth this meeting at the IAC and the Wayne Library. I could not make the Wayne Library meeting, but I thank you for your time. First, I want to point out that we do currently have a document circulating amongst the owners, the landowners being affected by this proposal. When it's fully reviewed and signed by the people, we will present it to the members. I want to just point out a few things. I don't want to keep this short because I know you're short on time. I want to just point out a couple of things about that meeting. First and foremost, the ordinance XXA. I am adamantly opposed to that. I mean, if we're going to work with anything, I would like the commissioners to understand that the XXB would be something we can work with, but there are still some things that need to be changed in there, or I'm opposed to. One of the things I am very let's see how I'm up with this. One of the things I really don't want to see done would be the redevelopment triggers, putting in place at 25%. That's going to put a really hard burden. They're going to trigger certain things for the town, for the landowners to put in place, and it's going to make it very difficult. The height restriction is another big concern. Right now, it's currently at 35 feet, and it includes all parts and attachments to the building. This is going to reduce the overall height. If you're going to include the cupola, the HVACs, as part of the building height, it's going to make it very difficult to get a 3-story building in there. I don't want to give up any rights in order to have multi-zoned or a residential use. So I want to make that clear. So that's my, there are my comments. Thank you.
By the way, as you know, this is going to planning, and they'll have a full hearing there, so make sure you go to there.
Yes, thank you.
Right. Any further? Moving on, I want to make an announcement. Vice President Biden is going to be in town on Wednesday for a political event with
Can I make a suggestion, John?
Yeah.
I think it's perfectly appropriate to make a statement that Vice President Biden is in town at this meeting. To go where you're just have gone may be inappropriate.
All right.
As a government.
Vice
entity.
President Biden's in town. We are,
For a political event.
we're working on a venue, right, Bob? We're between 2 venues.
That's correct.
And he'll be in town at 11, and you have to get there at 9 in the morning for the screening by the Secret Service. And stay tuned for which venue. We're looking at this building, and we're looking at Sulpizio Gym. And we just think it's great that Radnor can have the Vice President of the United States come here.
Are we looking at this building, Mr. Zankowski? I wasn't aware that that was an option.
It was an option that's being looked at. I believe they've got
prefer-
Sulpizio Gym as where.
It's the preferred.
The
I
best,
think it would
the
be a
preferred
mistake to use
location.
this building for a political event. As
Correct.
Commissioner Smith, so that would.
And just to be clear, we rent out Sulpizio Gym to anybody who pays the fee.
Correct, and there will be a fee associated with
Yep.
this.
That was
It's going to
very.
be paid up front, right?
I'm not sure if it will be.
Yeah, you might want to get the money up front.
But we
It's a
might be
joke,
able
it's a
to
joke.
Yep.
wheel lock one of the vehicles that come.
Okay. Anyway, moving on. Departmental reports.
I move they be accepted.
Just want to point out, as John Fisher alluded to before, the police report this month for September of patrol activity and incidents is extraordinary. Pages upon pages upon pages of incidents, I mean, ranging from egg throwing and rock throwing to a lot of inebriated young adults. And our police department is operating with down a few officers, and they've done an extraordinary job in a very difficult month. I don't know whether it was a full moon the whole month or what, but it was a crazy month. And I want to commend them for getting through it with aplomb.
It was the college kids' return month.
I don't think the college kids were throwing eggs all over, South Wayne. And I mean, it's just craziness of the fall.
And I'll just comment, I just want to comment that what might be helpful, Bob, these are great. We're receiving these reports, and I think it would be nice for us to have a highlight to present to the public at the meeting. I'm going to do some of that right now, but just because when we had staff at the meetings, we would actually get into the reports somewhat, or maybe discuss and question about the reports, but we don't have them here now. So in addition to the police activity, we did see about 70,000 permit fees on about $3 million worth of work, which I think is a very positive sign of the economic situation here in Radnor. And it looks like Parks and Rec has their new fall recreation guide out. So there are copies of this document in the room, so if anyone's interested in those details, please take a look.
Don't forget that every single week, Thursday or Friday, you can get on our website and see what each department has done all week in detail for anybody who's interested in that information.
I guess just to offer a reminder, and perhaps, I don't know, Bob, if you want to comment on this or talk to AJ, because I see AJ's not here, but the night before Halloween falls on a Saturday this year. So we may just want to have heightened sensitivity and, more visible police presence in some of the neighborhoods.
Keep your pumpkins in.
I think the police department is prepared for that upcoming evening as well as for Halloween night too as well.
Committee report. Public Works and Engineering, Bill.
We have before us a motion to reintroduce the ordinance to approve the floodplain map, and I so approve. So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, and.
Hold on, point of order.
Yeah.
Did we vote on the last? Did we have to vote on the last? It was moved and seconded.
Department reports accepted?
Yeah, we didn't vote on that.
Okay. Departmental reports have been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Good catch, John. So we have a motion and a second on this update to the floodplain ordinance. Any further discussion by the
Yeah,
commissioners?
I have a few questions. What's the reason for the change? What's the driving force behind the particulars of the language?
It was introduced last year, and it was for the design standards in which the map had come out. The township has not adopted it, so any design work that's being done, I believe, is under the 1993 standard, I believe. So this is to update the current flood maps, which again will have an impact not only on the residential areas, but also on, primarily on the residential areas, but also on the business areas, so that those design standards then are developed according to the 2009 floodplain map, as well as those residents in which there have been expanded flood zones here, that they would be able to acquire and obtain insurance to be able to cover that for their protection of their property.
So who provided the draft language changes?
It was introduced last year, and what we're looking to do is reintroduce this legislation.
Don, Dan Malloy did the majority of the work on this ordinance. I think it was introduced in February, actually, of this year. And it was, I believe, went to the Planning Commission. And there were some comments, because the draft you have, I added some comments from Dan Malloy that I received in February of this year. This is something that FEMA is going to require, too. This is something that's necessary to keep updated so that properties qualify for flood insurance.
But this isn't FEMA language. All these changes are language that we developed internally, a combination of staff and
There was a template.
Yeah.
That came
from
with it.
FEMA.
I don't know if it's from FEMA
Yeah,
or the state, but Dan had a template he worked
Okay.
on.
Yeah, I suspect that what happened, and FEMA looked at this, and Dan had some communication with whoever there was someone internally that looks at these ordinances.
Right.
That then came back, and what you have is, there was an initial draft the first week in February that I think the Planning Commission must have reviewed. There were a couple comments, and then this draft that you have is something that was finalized at the end of February this year.
Very good.
And it's been sitting since.
Okay, I have a couple of particular questions. One is on page 9, where we say that no variance shall be granted. Do we have authority to do something like that? And is that prudent? I mean, isn't the purpose of variances to find when a situation doesn't comply exactly with stated code, and we would want the opportunity to make that variance?
Don, which?
Page 9.
Page 9, the very bottom, no variance shall be granted for any construction, development, use, or activity, and it gives the conditions. And then similar to that, there's a subsequent section, section 82, is a section on variances. So I don't know if it's a conflict, or if, are we extending beyond our authority? And then also, is it prudent to extend beyond our authority, or is it, if we have the authority to do it, is that prudent? Because I would think we would want the opportunity to evaluate a variance.
Yeah, there always has to be a right for someone to seek a variance to the zoning hearing board of these regulations. I'm not sure what the,
You see the item I'm talking about?
yeah, it's page 10 of
It's
the
now,
copy
Don,
I have.
Don, it's specific to regulatory flood elevation areas. Is this considered a floodplain?
Section,
And if, right, so do we need to mention what federal law governs this provision? I mean, typically, I agree with Don, we're restating something, but I think this really falls on the shoulders of FEMA.
John, I'm looking at section, well,
It's
the
it's
section the section that's being revised is 280-81.
280-81,
Right.
Section A with the underlined area.
I have that.
There's
And
no
I-
variance for development. They don't want to increase the floodplain by more than a foot. 100-year floodplain, you can't increase the floodplain.
Well,
Right, but
basically what it does is it imposes another condition that the zoning hearing board has to take into consideration before they would grant a variance.
Right.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And so presumably, if we did pass this, as it's stated, this would go to the zoning hearing board as a condition that they would have to determine was met before they would grant a variance. That's all. Isn't that basically it? John? Isn't that basically it?
I believe so. But I think Don's question has some merit. I mean, what I need to look at, and again, this is something that, and talk to Dan about, is that language which says no variance shall be granted. Will the zoning hearing board take that as a total prohibition, that they don't have the power to grant a variance?
How could you not take that as a prohibition?
Well, that's what I think that needs to be worded slightly different.
No, it basically says you can't grant a variance if you're going to increase the 100-year flood elevation more than 1 foot at any particular point. Now,
So I come in and request a variance to that provision.
Well, that's right. That's one way, but I think that you don't have the power in a zoning ordinance to prohibit any variances by your zoning hearing board, and that's the way I would read that prohibition. So I need to understand from Dan why that was, because it's underlined. It was added at some point.
it would just seem to me that in the zoning ordinance, where you're discussing the criteria for the grant of a variance, which says at the very end, must comply with health, safety, welfare, whatever the generalized language is, somewhere in there you could put in here that with regard to any floodplain delineations, that the grant of a variance cannot increase the floodplain by more than 1 foot elevation at any particular point.
I agree,
To me,
but
that just limits the zoning hearing board and what they can do. Maybe it just has to be reworded differently.
yeah, I think that's a little, that needs to be modified if the boards, unless there's some other issues. I would go back to Dan, since he's the drafter of this, and understand where that came from. I don't think that came from FEMA.
Yeah. Well, we're reintroducing this tonight.
So it's going to go back through the process. Okay.
And I'd comment that we don't have a copy of the Planning Commission comments, and I think it's important for this board to have those when these are provided to us. And also, I think it's important to have Dan Malloy present for meetings in which we're introducing and/or hearing and acting on ordinances concerning zoning where he has expertise, because I think we have a lot of questions here.
Well, we're just reintroducing, so the
I understand.
questions
For
will be
tonight, it's maybe not necessary, but for the adoption, I would really feel more comfortable if he's present.
But if he's not present, you don't have to adopt it. The object is not to have the staff sitting here hour after hour, so we can always.
Yeah, I'm
we can
asking
always
that
have
he's
some-
scheduled to be here only when he needs to be here, and I think that might be a time when he needs
The
to be.
Planning Commission reviewed this at their February 1st meeting of this year, because I have a memo from Dan, February 3rd, which has basically 3 comments from that meeting, which I believe were incorporated in here. So I can circulate that, and I don't know what the reason for those changes were by the Planning Commission, but that's all that they did the last time they looked at it.
Does this go to county planning at any point of the
It
process?
will, yeah.
Okay.
It will.
So your recommendation would be for us to continue the reintroduction of this, and then that issue would be resolved between you and planning? And then it
Yes.
would come back to us in a resolved form?
And it'll go to the county, too, as a result of it. I'm not sure whether Dan sent it to the county at this point, so it's got to go to the county.
Does this particular proposed ordinance affect the ability of township residents to secure flood insurance?
We would preclude them, or?
No, I'm saying, does
It
it
will help
affect their
them.
ability to secure it?
Yes.
It will help them, yes,
It will help them.
absolutely, yes. Because FEMA will look at the local regulations in terms of flood insurance eligibility. It will absolutely help them. This needs to be updated
Particularly
on a regular basis.
given what happened last month, I think it's really important for us to move on this thing and not dawdle.
John or Bob, I have a question on page 6, item F. What was the logic of the 500 feet? Is that sufficient? Should it be, a distance plus a certain number of houses? I mean, it could be, depending upon the size of somebody's property, it could just be their two next door neighbors.
That was actually something that was added, I believe, back in February, and as a result of a couple resident comments when you introduced this last time.
But is 500 feet adequate?
I
mean, I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why 500 was selected, Kevin. I mean,
Can you just look into that? Look, I don't have any kind of expertise in this area, but it just struck me as risky in the sense that depending upon somebody's size of the property, it could be the house on either side of them.
Right.
A smaller piece of property, it might be a whole street. But, I just think we ought to just make sure it has the appropriate notification. Then I had a second question. I'm fairly confident of the answer, but I wanted to just be sure of it. Bottom of page 12, 280-82, item C. By putting it on the record, any future buyer, no matter how far out they acquire the property, would know that piece of property is built within the floodplain?
Kevin, which section are you referring to?
280-82, item C. It's at the bottom of page 12 of my copy, although, John, it sounds like yours might be slightly...
280.
It's the last comment before 280-115.
Oh, a deed restriction shall be.
Yeah. So any future
Right.
purchaser of that property will know.
Right.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure.
Any further commissioner comments? Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item is community development. Don?
Yes, I have asked a handful of people to come tonight to speak. Paul, would you come to the podium now? And what he's going to speak about is there's a cemetery, an abandoned cemetery in the 6th Ward. Currently, many of us think it's a neglected, inaccessible piece of land. We think it can be a cared-for, accessible piece of land. I want to initiate a process in which we evaluate whether we want to acquire that and bring it under township control. In the meantime, Paul, in his capacity as Rotary, has, among others, overseen a group to improve the site. So he's going to speak about that briefly, and a few others will also come speak about it.
Okay, I'll just give you a little background about our involvement.
And Paul, excuse me for interrupting, would you introduce yourself and your organization?
I'm Paul Sloat, and I'm actually officially president-elect for the Rotary Club of Wayne. Okay. I approached Don about 5 months ago looking for projects within the township where we could help out the town by cleaning stuff out, because we have done a number of projects in the Valley Forge Historical Park for the federal government in restoring properties there. And so when I spoke to him, he suggested this abandoned cemetery, which used to be associated with a Baptist church here in the area. And I started working, having Rotary work with Ted Pollard and the Radnor Historical Society on cleaning it up. And we've done a fairly extensive cleanup of the property where we have cleaned out much of the brush. And the next phase would be to restore the graves and do something about the fencing, so it would be actually a presentable property which the township could then take over. We have, in fact, about a week ago, we had about 4 community groups, including the Italian American Club, the Historical Society, us, and the American Legion, where they are all cleaning up the property. There will be another such session next week, and we'll have more in the spring once the weather is appropriate to do more work on the site. But it does have a historical relevance going back to actually the late 1700s with graves there and numerous graves from the Civil War. Yes, Don?
Thank you. And then Ted, would you just come up and talk a little bit about, just briefly about your group and the historical aspects of the site? Thank you, Paul.
I'm Ted Pollard, President of the Radnor Historical Society. I want to give you an overview of the history of the cemetery It was founded in about 1841, the same time the church was, that was on the corner of Conestoga and West Wayne Avenue. It's the location where the medical supply building is right now. There are about 460 graves in the cemetery, and one of our members has put them on findagrave.com so that people doing genealogical research can find their ancestors. There are at least 35 Civil War veterans there, plus other veterans, and I'll have more on that in a few minutes. In 1952, the church was torn down and the money put into a trust, but unfortunately the trust ran out of money in 2008. So the Radnor Historical Society took over, let's say, guardianship of the cemetery because we did not want to see it go into more disrepair. So far, we've had 12 clean-out sessions with over 100 volunteers from various groups, including Villanova University. And as Paul had mentioned, the IAC and the Wayne Rotary, plus about 35 people we have on our mailing list. On October 30th, we're going to have an Eagle Scout project there to identify the Civil War veterans, check their graves, make sure the markers are in their place, see the condition of the grave, and identify the regiment that each officer was part of. So we'll have a full report sometime after that. Our goal is to have this as a passive park in the 6th Ward, and it's a very, very peaceful place, very quiet. I'd like to put some park benches there and have it accessible to everybody in the township. And once the township takes over, then we can go get some fundraising. Right now we can't do that because who's going to donate money to a group that has a cemetery that has no ownership? And we also have the ability to get gravestones from the Veterans Administration for free. So once we get ownership here in the township, then we can go approach the VA for that. And that's about it. Thanks for your support.
Okay,
I
thank
have
you,
a couple
Ted.
questions.
Yes.
Wait, can you describe the location? Is it contiguous to the trail?
No.
So,
It's like half a block.
May I describe it? It's not contiguous. It's close to the trail, and it is linked by sidewalk. So in my opinion, it's very accessible to the trail.
so someone enjoying the trail, maybe we put some signage there, could come over
Yes.
easily and enjoy it.
I believe so, and I believe that that's one of the reasons why it's a valuable piece of property, not just to the 6th Ward, but to the township in general.
Yeah, I think
Thanks.
there's a couple locations where you could put a set of steps down from the trail leading into it. Thank you.
And then Marty and Bill Smith, would you come and just talk a little bit about the veterans and what your groups have done for this cemetery and also other cemeteries?
My name is Bill Smith. I'm the commander of American Legion Post 418 here in Wayne.
And I'm Marty Costello. I'm the commander of Bateman Gallagher, Post 668. It's very rare that we have 2 American Legion posts in the same town, but I'm pleased to share, and I hope Bill is pleased to share the podium and this particular project. Ted Pollard I've known for a long time, and he is the motivating factor behind this. He's a wonderful human being, and the veterans that are in this cemetery, as you may or may not know, 6.5% of the people in this country are veterans, and we consider all veterans our brothers, living and dead. This was a very poor example of what happens when people are forgotten. You can't forget those who came before us. At any time, if you do, then our whole nation will fall apart. These gentlemen who are buried in these graves wore the uniforms that we wore when we were young men, and the uniforms that the people who are now protecting our nation are wearing today, and for the same reason, to protect this country. And we have to protect them in their final resting place. And Mr. Curley asked us to come speak here tonight to let everybody in the township know. Maybe some people don't want this to happen, but it has to happen. I just want to read real quickly. Oh, and by the way, you were talking about colleges and universities early. You heard Colonel Church volunteer people for this project, and that'll happen 2 times a year, on Veterans Day and Martin Luther King Day. As many cadets as you want, up to 350, will come and help, whatever project it is. And the Eagle Scout project that Mr. Pollard was talking about is from St. Catherine's School. They will identify these soldiers, where they served, and when new tombstones are required, the VA will put their names, the regiment, on the stone and deliver it to the site. That's how much the VA cares about this, the national program. But I'll let Mr. Smith say something after I read this. This was from our Commander-in-Chief. The willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional to how they perceive veterans of earlier wars were treated and appreciated by our nation. That was George Washington. So George Washington got this back in the 1700s, and we as citizens today, we can't forget those who came before us. Thank you, and I support you 100%.
And
sir.
your groups are already preserving these cemeteries. I mean, you're working even before we brought this, or some brought this to our attention. Yes. Your groups were already at work in this, both in this cemetery and other cemeteries in the area.
That is correct. Our post is located at Valley Forge Military Academy and College, and we also sponsor the Boy Scouts there. There's a car cemetery on Upper Gulf Road, just off of Radnor Street Road. We work with them, with the Boy Scouts, as far as their Eagle Scout projects. And as Colonel Church mentioned, that the Academy does want to become community awareness and be part of the community, and we can provide all the labor that is needed when it is needed to get there. And I'm sure, with the exception of those 2 days, if we needed a few other bodies, we could. But it is important to remember the veterans and to go back to the beginning. And without the veterans, the American Legion is the largest veterans organization in the country. And we push for a lot of things in Washington. We've been very successful. And when we come up here and say this is what we're going to do, we're going to do it.
Very good. Thank you.
And real quick, Mr. Pollard just met Colonel Church for the first time today. They have emailed each other over the last couple of days. One of the major projects that Mr. Pollard has with the Radnor Historical Society is get the newspapers out of the old suburban building into this building. Colonel Church has volunteered the manpower to do that on Veterans Day. So if Mr. Pollard looks a little happier today than he did 2 days ago, that's the reason. This is what the colleges and the universities do for this town that you can't find on a ledger sheet anywhere. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
One other thing, just to bring you up to date, on Veterans Day, we go down to the War Memorial, and we have our service. And normally it's pretty small attended. We have some middle schoolers that come over. This year, as part of Valley Forge's initiative to get involved in the community, we're going to have over 200 cadets at that service. So I invite you and the community to also attend that. Thank you.
Thank you. So part of the reason why I chose these people, or I asked these people to come, there's lots of people working on the site, is that these groups represent Radnor groups. They're not Ward 6 groups. They're not people who are immediately adjacent to it. It's the Wayne Rotary. It's students from all over the township. It's grade school students, Eagle Scouts. There's a heavenly host of people that recognize that that's an asset for the township. So I want to initiate the process of evaluating. We don't make decisions, but to that end, I'm going to ask for a motion that the BOC refer the question regarding the value of acquisition of the abandoned cemetery on West Wayne Avenue to the following boards and commissions.
Can I just...
So moved.
Well, I'm not opposed to this, but John, didn't you advise us before that we have to take on this obligation?
You don't have to. There's a 1923 statute which basically says upon petition of some designated groups of folks to the Delaware County Court of Common Pleas, the court can order you to take ownership of this. One of the issues with this, and you also authorized me last fall to do a title search, and that's clean. That was one of the issues that came up. I think it was last fall. So there's a procedure that may involve petitioning Delaware County. If the board decides you want ownership of this, doing that voluntarily. There's an involuntary procedure that involves who's ever the current owner or a group of interested citizens to petition Delaware County to order the court, to have the court order the township take care of burial grounds like this.
Well,
So
I move that we put on the agenda for the next meeting to approve this.
Second.
Well, we don't. It's premature to approve it. We need to. what we need to do is send it to the implementation committee, have them identify its value in relation to the comprehensive plan. This is part of my motion. I'm in the midst of the motion. The second item's to the Parks and Rec Board to evaluate the prospective value of the site in regard to its role in the park system. And third, to the Open Space Committee to evaluate the prospective value of the site as open space, and that these boards report back in writing to the BOC no later than February 2011. Then when we have that information, we can decide if we want to proceed.
Don, why are we going through all this when there's something?
Yes,
I could
I
petition
can
the
tell you the
court tomorrow
reason,
and make the
because,
township take it over.
because when we get to that point of having a vote, people are going to come and they're going to be very upset that we didn't go through a formal process. So if you don't like this formal process, then vote
agree.
against it.
No, I agree with Don. I
Yeah.
think there's an element of practice and disciplined decision making, and this is and while there's an easy way out, as some
Yes.
have suggested, there's a more disciplined way, and I think it's I think we all
Yeah.
can speculate as to the future outcome, but we ought to, as you
Right.
suggest, go through
And
the process.
to elaborate that, tonight we came up with people who told us that we're buying land inappropriately, and here I am an hour later saying I want us to acquire more land. But what I want to do is set up a process where we evaluate this land, and then we make a decision.
Yeah, let's buy it, because then we can sell it.
Well, I think it does, John, is it, if we go through the process and we decide to do it, it's not going to cost us anything, right?
No. Well, what it may...
It costs us to maintain, I understand that, but the
Right.
acquisition cost, let me
Because,
rephrase my question.
I mean, the only clean way that I see to do this, because I'm not sure where we would find the current owners to sign a deed over to the township, is to petition Delaware County. So, and I will tell you right now, that won't cost you any money,
You'll do that for free?
other than the filing fees.
You'll
It
donate.
won't even cost you, yes.
You're
It won't.
donating your services.
I am,
Okay.
if you make the decision to go forward, I'm donating my services.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor, and any further discussion by the commissioners? Any public discussion?
Actually, I have a quick comment. You can still come up with it. I think I have to agree with Bill. I think there is a time for diligence, and there's a time to have a process. But it sounds like to me, I don't believe there's any mention in the master plan of cemeteries. I don't know what these other committees could add to this decision. We just heard, we've been listening to this story for about a year now, maybe a little bit longer. I think I was out one time. I volunteered a little bit of time in that space. Villanova graduates came out, students came out and volunteered in that space. This is a cemetery that needs to be taken care of. While I'm not looking for more burden for us, I think in the end, it's our responsibility. And, whether we pass it off to committees or not, I don't know if it's going to matter. I think what would be more helpful is if we get this process moving so that, in fact, we can go after funding and get these outside organizations involved in funding these improvements. So for that reason, I'll be voting against the motion.
Well, I just want to add, we do have an open space plan. We do have criteria. We do have a process for evaluating opportunities when they come before us. And I totally agree that we should be following that process more closely and documenting it. I'm happy to do it. In the end, even if a project doesn't score well on the criteria, it's still up to the 7 commissioners whether to proceed or not. But I'm happy to follow the process. I think it's a good idea that we do that.
Rob Murdaca, Radnor Township, 6th Ward. Don, thank you for trying to implement a process. I guess I'll try to make this comment as a citizen, not as a CBFAC member. But in hearing CBFAC, if you are going to proceed with this, I would at least like to suggest maybe you use it as a test case to follow the processes in that CBFAC report in an acquisition process, because there are some processes in place, but they're lacking. I've read a lot of documents on this. I do not profess to be the expert on it, but there's some lacking processes that I think it would be good to follow.
Very good.
For what's worth, I take these comments my own comments pretty seriously. My two favorite lieutenant colonels in the country are my father-in-law, 20 years in the Marines, and my neighbor, John Church. So I'm not trying to stem the tide of something that feels like a natural act, is kind of what John Fisher's saying, but process is pretty important here, too.
Pretty good. And nothing that we're going to do tonight would prevent a further analysis, even the issue of the carrying costs we have to decide. But to me, it's premature to view the carrying costs. Let's see what these other groups say about the value. If it's valuable, then we'll get the carrying costs to make our decision.
Well, the carrying costs are part of the criteria.
Very
How
good.
much it costs, how much it costs to maintain. So that comes into the consideration.
Very good.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any further comments?
For the information of the board, that property, when I first became aware of it, didn't even have a parcel number. Nobody knew who it belonged to. And it was assigned a parcel number, and it was also assigned to the Baptist church down here across from the movie theater on Wayne, because the policy was that an abandoned cemetery is assigned to the closest church of the same denomination. They reject, though, having anything to do with it. And further, there's another abandoned cemetery in the township. It's down on Darby Paoli Road, down past that old schoolhouse that I believe the township owns. It's called the Brook Family.
It's right next
plot.
to Overbrook Golf
Right
Club.
next to Overbrook Golf Course.
Yes, it's right on the property line with Overbrook Golf Course, and there's a couple of houses there, a property that was divided, and neither of those people claim ownership of that cemetery. There were some flowers there, like somebody cares about the place. It seems
There
to be
was someone working on it this weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think it's called the Brook Family Plot. So it doesn't have a folio number. I don't
Well,
know
we
who,
can't
I don't
tax
know who
the
owns
dead
that.
no matter how hard you try.
Say again?
We can't tax those that have passed away no matter how hard you try.
Shrouds don't have pockets.
Okay, let's call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed?
Motion carries. Finance and Audit, Kevin.
The first item on the agenda is the motion to approve the schedule of bills payable identified as 10-10B or 2010-10B. The grand total of the authorized disbursement amount is $1,936,358.86, and they've been approved by the various department heads, verified and processed by the Finance Department, and are within the 2010 budgetary limits as approved by the Board of Commissioners. So I motion that this be introduced and approved.
Second?
Made and seconded. Any questions from the commissioners?
Yes, there's one item on page 2, a payment to Office Basics, and I had previously disclosed that my cousin's estate owns Office Basics and recused myself from that particular item.
And I'll just comment, I believe Commissioner Higgins had questioned why the last bills payable was only about $800,000. It's because this one's $1.9 million. And you certainly made up for the deficit last time, so.
Thank you, John.
Any further questions? Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, the next item on the agenda, I don't know if Bill or Bob are going to lead us through the discussion, but I think it's a relatively simple request to approve a motion to take an RFQ for an Act 511 business tax software. I think it's pretty apparent, but if you want to give us a quick rundown.
Yeah, this is generated out of a need situation where the data that we have currently, that we track all of the various accounts in this process, is done in an Access database. It has grown to the point now where the database struggles to keep up, crashes anytime that anything is amended within the database and has to be rebooted. It doesn't allow for different departments to share the data when payments come in. So there's a need here. Assistant Manager Bill Martin has been working working with a particular company in trying to identify if there are software opportunities out there, there appear to be, so this motion would allow us then to formally go out and ask for proposals.
It's a ballpark of what that might cost.
Well, I'm not sure, to be honest.
I think I wouldn't answer that. Let's let the RFQs drive
Yeah,
that.
and it's going to depend on what kind of proposal they put together, whether they are selling software or if they're selling a service. So
Is this tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands? We don't know.
probably more the former than the latter. Yeah.
So you need a motion from us to.
I move the approval.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any further discussion? Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
The next item on the agenda is Resolution 2010-56 pertaining to the 2010 pension allocation. And Bill, before I go forward with this, I just want to make sure I have my sort of sequence of papers accurate because I have a question on one of the items. The memo that you provided entitled a subject matter pension action required for October 25th, 2010 Board of Commissioners meeting is for item F, correct?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have some questions on that. So
It covered both, but most of the information in that memo covers F.
Right, that's okay, because I think 2010-56 is pretty straightforward. The only question I had, and tell me if I found the correct and accurate information, we had budgeted that we would receive $600,000. It came in a little bit light, not much, $11,000 or so light, but pretty good forecast.
Yep.
Okay, I motion that this be approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Rather than read item F, I think it's apparent what it says there, but it's a motion pertaining to the pension. I have a couple of questions, Bill, on this. The first question, is our pension plan, are our pension plan assumptions and funding assumptions based on an 8% return on investment?
Yeah, at this time, that is correct. Our
Okay.
2009 valuation that was completed by Mock and Hop earlier this year was based on that revenue assumption, which was decided by the township at some time in the past.
Who makes that decision?
Outside of the township, I'm not sure. I didn't go back and research exactly when or
Do
where
the
that-
actuaries come to us and make a recommendation to us and we endorse it and that was based on that point in time? Or I mean, you know, you could make a favorable assumption to have a favorable budget impact, but it might, you know, be inappropriate and jeopardize, you know, future budgets. So I'm just trying to understand the basis for 8%, because I'm fairly confident we're not getting 8%, and it doesn't look like we're going to get 8% anytime soon based on the current market rates.
Well, I share your confidence in that regard. I would imagine that, you know, based on my 3 months of dealing with Mock and Hop, that they would have provided some sort of analysis and recommendation to somebody. Again, I don't know exactly what the process was when that decision was made, but.
Is that number, doesn't that come from the historic returns in the market? You know, long-term, 30, 40-year returns? I think it's 8 to 12%. They're not making it up. It's some.
I doubt there's an 8 to 10% over 30 or 40 years.
I believe it's 12.
Yeah, we'll see.
The argument with going in that direction would be exactly that if you take a look at the market over an extremely long period of time, the returns are greater than typically
Depends on
what
where
you're
you-
looking
yeah,
at
Depends on where you start.
or where you finish.
Right. Well, we know where we're finishing, unfortunately, right now. I guess my other question on this point, do we really need to decide this tonight?
Well-
Because while I don't necessarily disagree with your guidance, in the absence of having an actual proposed budget in front of me, where I can understand the trade-offs that have to be made, my preference is to defer this. And the way I read this is I really don't have to decide this tonight. I don't know if I misinterpreted that or not.
The actual decision as to whether or not the board wishes to move forward with doing the 25% reduction on the amortization can occur at a later date. What needs to be decided tonight is, in filling out this Act 205 Recovery Program election form, if we don't choose that as one of the options we're considering, then we won't have the ability to consider it at a later date. So what we're looking for tonight is, if the board wishes to make that an option, to direct the administration to go ahead and check off that box on the form so that it can be part of our decision-making later.
Okay, I didn't understand it with that. Thank you for that clarification. Then I really have no issue. So you're just saying if we don't do this tonight, that option is foreclosed to us, and we don't want to not have that option available to us.
If you don't give us the direction to check that box off tonight, we won't be able to talk about it later.
Move the approval. A little discussion here. I'm actually against the concept of what do you call it, the amortization contribution reduction of 25%. And I don't have any need for this, in my mind, for this to be done. We've already done this. We're under the 130% IAS, the increased asset smoothing. Deferring these payments any further to any further board is just going to be crippling. It's going to be crippling. I mean, we're talking about saying we're not going to put in as much into the pension as we want to, but the future boards are going to have to put in double. And I just can't, with any conscience, do that, so I'm going to vote against this.
Mr. Jankowski, what's your opinion on it?
I think you want to leave the options open to the township, because if not, you're going to have to reduce expenses somehow down the road. And again, when you're looking at labor as being your biggest expense, you're going to have to do that. All this is just allowing that option to be considered down the road. So, anything else you want to add?
Can I ask a question? The prior board, last year they did take the reduction, right?
Well, the prior board elected to do the smoothing,
Okay.
which established, based on what I've been able to find research-wise, is established the rate of return, assumed rate of return, and 130% smoothing calculation, which is supposed to take the extremes out of the valuation. So when things are really bad, it assumes that they will be corrected at some point in the future by improved or asset growth.
And that's just for 1 year?
It's an annual election, but typically when you make that decision, you're making the decision that you'll stick with it over a period of time, because to do the smoothing once and then to stop doing it is going to throw off valuations in the future and require, depending on where the calculations were, where the asset growth or decline was at, it's going to require that to be made up at one time. So
I just want to understand, we can continue to go with this smoothing approach, which is something that's separate from the reduction.
Yeah, the 25% reduction in the amortization rates would be in addition to the smoothing election that was decided upon.
Okay, and then the shortfall, if you do take the reduction, the 300,000, is that due the next year or over time, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's going to depend on where the actuarial valuation comes in at, the next one. The next valuation will be done, is scheduled to be for 1/1 of 2011, but it won't be completed until sometime in 2012. So it'll be some time before we know where those numbers fall out at. There's all the different factors that are in play. It's going to depend on what happens with the market, what happens with the assets. It's going to depend on what happens with our staffing, our minimum obligation numbers. There's a lot of different factors at play. One thing's for sure, though, with the 25% reduction, if elected this year, is that without a greater than 8% growth in those assets in the near term, that will be needed, that will have to be made up sooner rather than later.
Anyway, my final comment on this is that we've already elected to use the increased asset smoothing of 130%, and it sounds like this amortization contribution reduction of 25% would be in addition to, and I think we've already tied the hands of future boards with the smoothing. So, and in fact, it may be us if the number's up. So I'm going to vote against this just in the spirit of it, but I know I'll have a chance to vote against it if we decide to go that way at the next meeting.
Any further discussion? Any public discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries.
The next item on the agenda is Resolution 20-57, a supplemental budget resolution. And to paraphrase, and if I misspeak, correct me, but essentially it's to authorize the expenditure of the $10,000 donation that we received from the Chanticleer Foundation for the tree program. Do I have it accurate?
We wouldn't be authorizing the expenditure at this time. What we'd be doing is recognizing that, A, we received the $10,000 and put it in the revenue estimate, and based on that, go ahead and add a $10,000 budget line item on the expense side. Being that it's over $3,000, it would require another and separate board approval to actually expend the dollars.
Got it.
But is it going to be earmarked for tree planting? Because I think that's what Chanticleer's intent was in donating the money.
Yeah, and that's why the resolution in front of you tonight creates a special line dedicated specifically for Chanticleer tree donation program. So, yes.
Move the approval of the resolution.
Second.
Moved and second. Any further discussion?
I just want to throw out there that Chanticleer has really, we owe them a great debt of gratitude. They've been working on the big tree project. You know, our budget for planting trees has gone down. They've stepped up. They're helping us regreen, working with the Conservancy, working with staff, and have planted many, many trees that we would not have been able to plant absent their help. So if they're listening, thank you.
Any further discussion? Any public discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You're all done. Library. Either of you? No? Personnel Administration, John.
First, I just want to give an update on the Superintendent of Police interviews. The interviews continued last week with staff and a subset of the Board of Commissioners. Commissioners Nagel and myself were present, and we're continuing that process, and we hope to have a candidate to present very shortly. On the agenda, I have Resolution 2010-54. This is a conflict of interest disclosure, and this is a document that I believe John Rice has brought along to us in response to a lot of questions about conflicts of interest. So, John Rice, would you want to comment on this?
This is a second draft of a resolution that the board discussed at one of your July meetings this year. As a result of that discussion, what the board did then was kick this back to the staff to rework it. Some of the board members provided some additional comments and suggestions. Bob and I have discussed this. I've incorporated what comments I received back from the various commissioners. That's what you see underlined in this draft. That's what's different from what you had in front of you back in July. Basically, I think the goal here was to clarify for boards and commissions that, you know, there's potential conflicts of interest, there's actual conflicts of interest, and then there's other things that are people's biases that sometimes get interpreted as conflicts of interest, which aren't necessarily conflicts of interest. So this sets forth, I think, a clearer policy, so anybody on any board, commission, any consultant, any outside consultant, any elected official would be subject to this. One of the things that I changed, which I thought was a source of some issue at the last board meeting, is on the front page, a disclosure requirement. The disclosure would go to the township manager. township manager would, in effect, vet those, and then under paragraph C, would make a determination as to whether or not there's a actual potential conflict, and then deal directly with the individual commission member or board member or consultant or employee, and then hopefully resolve that issue. If there was a true conflict that would require somebody to recuse themselves from a particular activity or a vote, whatever it would be, it wouldn't come to the board unless there was some disagreement. I think practically this is probably not going to happen very often. It ought to be dealt with at least at the manager level. I'm sure I'll get involved in some of these issues, but it's a way to put any conflicts out on the table so everyone's aware of it. Whether or not that results in a disqualification is really going to be a case-by-case situation, but at least everyone knows if there are potential or actual conflicts. There may be businesses that individuals are associated with. That business comes in for a subdivision or a land development. That needs to be out on the table so everyone is operating from the same set of information. The other thing that I've added to this since July is something that's in the charter, subsection E, which I think we began doing that in the last year, but the suggestion was that this be added to this resolution also, so that it's all in one spot for any of the elected appointed officials, any consultants, any employees. So it's back to the board for some further discussion and some action if that's your desire.
John, I just want to make sure that this resolution is compliant with the state ethics code and the state ethics definitions of what a conflict of interest is, and that we don't have any issues where we're preempting the state or...
No, this is broader actually than what the state conflict of interest statute addresses, which is really the elected officials and a very small group of other township officials. This broadens the township's conflict of interest policies beyond that. So you're now covering under this resolution employees, outside consultants, board members, commission members, anyone that's involved in any kind of decision-making process in the township. So I don't see that there's any statutory conflict here, John, on this.
Okay, well, after reading it several times and looking at the state ethics code, I believe this is a good document in terms of providing guidance to all the boards and commissions in the township, including the Board of Commissioners, and I'm in favor of this. So I'll move to introduce Resolution 2010-54.
Second.
There's one small section that has me a little concerned, and I'm sorry for not bringing this up earlier. Section 2A, subsection 4, so it's on page 2, the second paragraph down. It says, elected appointed official, blah, 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 is a member or officer of an organization which receives grant funding. And my only concern there is that every 501c3 operates differently, and there's no membership when you are a volunteer or you donate. Some, though, you write a check to them, you go donate, you become a member. You don't have any decision-making ability, you don't vote, but you're a member. And I just don't want all of our board volunteers to have to disclose that they're a member of the library or that they're a member of the Wayne Arts Center because they they volunteer there, or they have a card, or they make donations. We could insert just one word, a voting member, or office, because I think that's what we're getting at as someone who has some sort of decision-making ability. Regular contributors, supporters, volunteers should not be covered under this policy if they have no decision-making authority at all. So I would move to amend John's motion to pass this resolution by adding voting before member in section 2, subsection A, subsection 4.
I'll accept that modification as stated.
Just,
So we have
Just
an
a-
amendment that's moved and seconded, discussion on that amendment.
yeah, I just have a question for John Rice. Would that be consistent with the state?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this, again, you're expanding what the state covers under the State Ethics Act, so.
Well, actually, well, depending on that definition, if item 4 was specifically worded the way it is in the state ethics rules, you would be shrinking it. Because if they say it's a member, and now we're limiting it to a voting member, I just want to understand whether or not.
Yeah, I don't see that as a conflict, Kevin. I mean, remember that the State Ethics Act only going to govern 7 of you, township manager, myself, and another small group of individuals that make certain types of decisions.
Right,
So-
but does the state ethics act say a member? Does it say, is this language here lifted specifically from the state ethics act?
No,
Okay.
it's not.
So you asked for comment on this. Would you, I think that's a logical extension that should be done on 3 and 4, not just 3, for the reasons that Elaine identified. And then for number 5, member was taken out. To me, we've got the orientation backwards. We were looser for the organization that contributes money. So I'd say we should include member, but include the prefix voting. It would get to the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish.
Is that your motion?
Well, it was amended informally, so I'm seeing if you're consider.
Yeah, I think that's consistent, and I have no issue with that.
Very good. So I'd like those included then. And then
I
I
accept
have
that.
other issues. Now is my turn on.
Can I, just, Don, before you start, so 3, 4, and 5, as I understand, would all read voting member.
Yes.
Okay.
On 2A, I think it would be prudent and wise to specify that we have to put the burden on, the township has the burden to identify via some kind of form what is required via disclosure, meaning that if we tell someone they have to disclose, they might not know that they have to disclose their church or their, so I'd like to see some kind of form included, and then that form just becomes a document that anyone can access. Now, whether we need to include that in this motion, I don't know, but that's what I'd like to see. That's the policy I'd like to see. Any thoughts on that among the board?
I don't believe it needs to be part of the resolution, but as part of adopting this resolution, we can require, from an administrative standpoint, that a form be provided to all those under this resolution.
So, Mr. Zankowski, any thoughts on that? Do you think we need to elaborate more on that item, or?
I think in item D, it spells that out through an annual disclosure form. Last line.
Don, there was a form.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah, there was a form that was circulated back in July that, it's a fill-in-the-blanks form.
Right, so that's what it'll be. It'll be a fill-in-the-blank form. Very good. All right, and then do we have any obligation, like, for example, churches? Are we violating somebody's rights if we make them disclose that they're part of a church, since our churches receive in-kind contributions?
I mean, I don't really have an issue with that. It's still something that can be disclosed. It may not necessarily recuse somebody from acting. If someone chooses not to disclose it, they choose not to disclose it.
Okay, so on page 2, item C, do we have the authority, does the township manager have the authority to prohibit a commissioner from participating in debate? I would think not. I would think that right is limited to the voters and an authority much higher than the Board of Commissioners. So under this, the township manager has the authority to determine whether it
exists.
Yet whether it exists.
And then to make a recommendation to the individual.
Yes, but then under F, it says elected items shall not participate in discussion or debate. So I read that as a 1-2 combination that takes the authority, takes the
which the board would delegate to the manager by this resolution.
Okay, that's the first question, I mean, from a policy perspective, I think that's a mistake. But do we have the authority to tell another board member to delegate that authority and prevent another board member from participating in a vote?
Well, I think you have the authority to establish these types of rules and regulations as a board to deal with the conduct of the board in this
Very good.
particular instance.
So is there any interest in the board? I think a two-tiered approach would be better in that we follow a process like this where the manager makes a recommendation, and I think the language would have to be changed such that it doesn't say that the manager makes the determination. It just says that he makes the recommendation. And then we as a board decide on whether that person...
I think that's what it says.
Second sentence.
That's what it says.
I don't read it that way.
Well, I
read
mean,
the
that's...
the township manager shall determine, and that means that whatever the township manager determines is the writing law.
Well, no, he says he determines whether or not there's a conflict. Then he makes a recommendation to the individual who has the option
All right.
to disagree with it.
I don't think I'm parsing words. I'll have to just rely on Mr. Rice to tell me otherwise. But I read that he makes a determination, and that determination is what it is, regardless of what the recommendation is. And that's the problematic part of that I see.
No, Don, I'm on paragraph C.
Yes.
So upon disclosure, it then says to the manager shall make a recommendation to the official employee outside consultant.
But I think if you back up, Don's concerned, I think perhaps, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Don, it says on line 2 there, the township manager determines, and I think...
Yes. So once he determines it, then that's what it is. He determines that it's a conflict, then it doesn't matter what he recommends. He says it's a conflict, and we don't really have any say.
Well...
I don't agree with that one.
Okay.
I read it as when there's a disagreement with the recommendation, there is a conflict. The person who is the subject of that potential conflict then goes to the Board of Commissioners
Right.
and says, I don't agree with that. So essentially, it's a de novo. It's essentially a de novo kind of hearing.
Right. What I was attempting to do with this, and this was rewritten as a result of the discussion that the board had in July. Someone has to make that initial determination, and it's going to be the manager's opinion.
Yes.
I mean, we can parse the words or revise.
Well, it's not my intention to parse, but
going to be
you
his-
interpret this is intended to the decision-making authority is not with the manager, it is
Correct.
with the Board of Commissioners.
When there's a disagreement, ultimately,
Very good.
you know, the manager should go to the person and say, hey, I think you shouldn't be involved in this. This looks like a conflict. That person's either going to say, okay. In most cases, most individuals are going to say,
Okay,
sure.
Very good. Well, that's what I wanted to do, so I'll
Actually, though,
that's-
as you say that, and maybe I am missing it, under C, there's no obligation or requirement on the township manager to advise us that he or she has a different opinion than the member. Maybe I'm not picking that up in this discussion, but
Well, if the individual disagrees with the township manager's recommendation.
right. But how do we know? I mean, we're relying on the township manager to disclose this, but there's nothing here that says the township manager has to do that.
No, if he tells me I've got a conflict of interest and I don't agree with it, I'm going to come to the 6 of you and say,
Yeah.
I don't agree with this. Make a decision.
The manager should stand up for his decision and in public even.
Sure.
I agree with all that. It just doesn't say he has to do it.
Yeah, and the more problematic aspect of that is going to be with a lower level board where that person wouldn't be inclined to challenge the manager.
Well, it becomes a question then of adding some additional provisions in here that if there's a disagreement, it'll be presented to the Board of Commissioners to resolve.
That's what I'd like to see.
I mean, that would, Kevin and Don, that would add
I
that
just know
extra
I just know, John, that
affirmative
some of the
duty.
pain we've suffered over the last couple of
Sure.
years has been due to the subjective interpretation of various provisions.
Right.
As I read C, though, I think it says if the individual disagrees with the township manager's recommendation, the Board of Commissioners may make a determination as to whether a conflict exists. I think that would cover other persons other than Board of Commissioners.
Yeah, it's who's ever.
They can appeal to the Board of
Correct.
Commissioners.
Right.
There's no obligation to disclose, on the township manager to disclose the conflict.
There isn't, but there's a matter of
The reason we're
obligation and
pushing
trust.
off the township manager, so we're not making that determination, he's making a determination. We're not,
Agree 100%, but I just know, based on the experience I've had in the few years I've done this, that it's not a good idea to leave things subject to interpretation when you can avoid it.
Are you suggesting that the board has equal power and in turn maybe the manager has the ability to, like, for instance, we could raise the issue? Because you're saying, what if the manager doesn't raise the issue?
Right.
We have an ethics, we also have an ethics committee.
We'd have to know about it. So if I go to Bob and I say, hey, I got this conflict, I got this issue, and Bob says, Kevin, I think you have a conflict. And I say, well, Bob, I disagree with you. And Bob decides he doesn't want to bring it up. For whatever reason. He likes me. I bought him a couple of beers. I don't know.
Are you making a disclosure right now, Kevin?
But
If there's a disagreement, the burden's going to be on the manager to bring that to the board. So your concern is
This
that-
is a plus, and the plus is that the manager will be very conservative in bringing these.
I agree. I just don't want to see people sitting here 20 years from now like we're sitting here, like we sat here for the last couple of years, and ran into issues
In this
subject to
climate,
interpretation.
we certainly have the ability. The only question I would have is these disclosure statements. Are they public records? Can they be acquired under the Open Records Act and Sunshine Act?
Yeah,
ours are.
I don't see why not.
So in that case,
What if it's a conversation?
No, but it's all based
What do you
on
mean?
the declaration on the form. Yeah.
Fair enough.
So is anyone else concerned, in my opinion, it's inappropriate for the board to determine that another board member has a conflict and essentially to exclude that board member from a vote. Does anyone else share that concern?
yeah, well, can you actually exclude him? I mean, can he vote?
Yes,
In
according to this,
violation?
you exclude him.
What?
According to this, you exclude him.
According to this, if there's a determination is made, say there's a disagreement between the manager and a commissioner member, that person would not participate in any discussion or debate.
So yes, that means it's prone for political manipulation. I don't think
It's a
these
policy
seven are gonna do
that you're establishing for the board itself also.
See, the way it will work with me, okay, if he's determined to have a conflict, I don't agree with it, I come in the board, I'm voting anyway.
Well,
if
you're
I
not gonna
disagree
be
with
able
him.
to vote
You know,
then.
I mean, I should be able to vote anyway. They want to take me to ethics board, they can. But if I'm the final vote in a 4-3 decision, I ought to have the right to vote.
That's not what it says here, Bill.
not what
I
it
know,
says.
I know, I'm just agreeing with that.
Well, we could add, if the conflict exists, it would require a 2/3 vote of the board.
So-
I think there is a risk here, but at the same time, there's some benefit.
Let me just, there is some benefit, but I don't mean to be melodramatic, but it's a sacred thing that people put their trust in you for a vote. And it's not up to someone from some other place that isn't represented to decide that you can or can't speak on a particular vote. I mean, and you correct me if I'm wrong, and John, elaborate if this point is accurate, but the state makes there's a lot of rules about going back on a vote. There's a lot of authority put in what the voters say.
Right.
And I think we are sort of inappropriately dismissing that. So in my opinion, there should be a two-tiered system that the logic of this with the minor changes that we discussed would apply to the board levels below this. But to this board, it should be whatever governs the state rules on these things and the voters, not the other commissioners. So for me, that's a fatal flaw that would cause me to vote against it and would require adjustment. The others are sort of minor concerns, but that's a fatal flaw for me.
Are you suggesting that if there's a conflict with a potential conflict with a board member, or the manager finds there's a conflict, that it then has to be appealed to the state ethics board? Because if that's what you're suggesting.
No, the township ethics.
No, I'm
Township
suggesting
ethics
that
board?
whatever rules are in place, those rules apply. I don't know what they are.
I mean, if I vote on something, I have a conflict, anybody can take me to the ethics board in Radnor Township and have a hearing.
The problem is the vote took place.
What's that?
The problem is the vote took place.
What this,
Right.
the
That's-
the issue that Don raises is that this is broader than what the state requires of elected officials. So we broaden this. This is broader, and it's a question of, do you want to exempt yourselves from this broader definition, or do you want to retain your ability to vote strictly under the guidelines of the Ethics Act? That's the issue.
I just don't, I might misunderstand that, but I don't agree with that assessment of the issue. To me, the fundamental thing here is that people in the ward elected, use Bill as an example, they elected Bill, and he has I don't mean to be melodramatic, but he has a sacred duty to them, and it's not appropriate for the rest of us to take away his right to vote on the issues. It's up to him, and if he does poorly, he has to answer to the voters and to this state, to some authority higher than the 7 of us. So that's the way I want it to read. And for me, that's a fatal flaw. And if there's others that feel that way, then we'll worry about changing it or try to change it.
One of the issues you can do, and maybe we, take another shot at this and clean some of this up, but one of the things you can do is, because there is a provision in the Ethics Act for certain township sizes. If, let's say there's an issue that one of you, under this policy, but not under the Ethics Act, is precluded from voting on, and it's a 3-3, and you're in that instance, there is a provision in the Ethics Act. I think it's only for 5-member boards of supervisors, but not 3-member boards of supervisors, that the conflicted tiebreaker can vote on a 5-member board. So you've got a 7-member board. So if you have that situation, and under this, not under the State Ethics Act, because you probably can't vote under the State Ethics Act. But if it's a conflict under this, but not under the state, you can vote if it's a need to break a tie. We can wrap that into there, Don. That'll help.
Well, that
or
doesn't
address some of
satisfy
that issue.
my concern, though. So under the current situation, if, let's say, the manager and the solicitor indicated that there was a conflict, and the commissioner decided to participate and vote, what is the recourse against that commissioner, and from whom?
Not much recourse, other than your board members sanctioning you for violating.
Well, no, you can go to the
resolution.
township ethics. They can have a hearing.
They could do that.
And they kick it back
But
to the
let's carry this out from a practical point of view for a second, because it's beginning to concern me a little bit, and I'm going to use an extreme, obvious example to make a point. If Bill has a real estate partner, and we're looking at buying a piece of open space, and that partner would, or friend or whatever, would make a commission on the sale. And Bob has advised Bill that, you shouldn't vote on this because of the fact that this person who's your partner would make a commission on the sale. And Bill says, well, I'm not getting a commission, and I'm not picking on you, Bill. I'm just using an easy example.
No, I like making commissions.
But so Bill says, well, it's not coming to me. I'm going to vote on it, and the vote's 4-3. You can't undo that vote. It's been acquired, and
But what are you voting on?
acquire land, open
for
space.
the township to acquire land, and the seller or the agent for the seller, Bill has a business relationship.
Correct.
Under the State Ethics Act, he wouldn't be able to vote.
He can't vote.
It's a business that he is associated with.
He can't vote, or he can
He
choose.
cannot. He cannot under the State Ethics Act, because there'd be some pecuniary gain realized by a business he's associated with. So you have that. You have the State Act, and you have this. This is a broader policy, which would apply across the board. I think there's a potential for, I would be surprised if it would ever happen, but there's a potential for tie votes on situations. You can have a tiebreaker wrapped into this.
You've still tainted the system by pulling the person out of the debate, and to me, that's inappropriate. So I'm going to vote against it, as long as it has that fatal flaw, and then if there's, yes, that's.
I'm going to move the table.
But
until
the
we
other
can get some of these
question,
things straightened
the other
out.
question that I have here is, and this is my opinion, I think we're reading way more into this. I mean, the
Yeah.
issue is if from my listening to this conversation, is you're trying to find a way to navigate through something in which you're trying to disclose a conflict of interest. Here it talks about if there's a potential or actual conflict exists. It says not participate in any discussion or debate of the subject matter. It does not talk about a vote. But then it also goes on to say, is notwithstanding the foregoing, the interested individual may present to provide clarifying information in such a discussion or debate if requested by the township manager or the board of commissioners. So this way, they still have the opportunity to do this. But
Yeah,
the
I think-
conversation, we're trying to find more ways to
I
break
think
through
we're
this.
overanalyzing it. If the board votes that I can't vote, they're saving my soul probably, so it's okay, Don. Let's not kill it.
The way I look at it is that if the manager feels strongly about it and if the board feels strongly about it, in this case, the board would be going against the manager. So in this case, I really have to think this is,
All right.
it's
All right,
helpful.
so
Honestly, if we have political manipulation going on to that extent, I mean, we got bigger problems
Yeah.
than this.
Well, then maybe we have to vote, at that point, if that ever happens, the
All right,
resolution
I'm
can be
calling
rescinded.
the vote.
Well, let me
This is
ask
the
John.
vote
Let me
on-
ask John Rice one question before you. John, based on the discussion, do you think you ought to relook at this and fine tune it, or do you think it's worded adequately for a good vote?
I mean, the only issue, based on the discussion, we had some amendments in terms of adding voting member to those three paragraphs. The only concern, the only other thing I would add, and if you want to wrap this into your motion, is the tiebreaker. I mean, I could see a situation where you have a 3-3 vote on a important matter, and I think that if the seventh commissioner has a conflict, and it's permitted under the state act, then it ought to be to vote, should be permitted and not precluded under your own resolution.
But it's only for
I'd like
5
to see that.
supervisors, right? It's not for 7 commissioners.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about the expanded conflict of interest that you have in this policy, not the state act.
Yeah.
If this expanded policy precludes one of you from voting on something and you're deadlocked, then that seventh commissioner ought to be able to vote. So I would add that, Kevin, to this.
I
Even if he has a
I
conflict?
think I know where Hank is going, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it might be worth. There's absolutely
to
no
see
reason to do this
I'd
tonight.
like to see it in black and white, so
Right.
we're sure of what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So I move the table.
No, I moved the table
Can we move the
already.
table
You
to the
seconded
next
mine.
meeting?
I moved your second.
Yeah.
Can we make a time certain to the next meeting?
Sure.
Table
You
to the
okay
next
with that,
meeting?
Hank?
That's fine.
Okay, we have motion made and seconded
Well,
at the table.
So we're going to put in there so that for a tiebreaker, if the commissioner has a conflict and the board split on a 3-3, that he can vote with the conflict?
Yes.
Only if it's not a state conflict.
Right, provided that it's not a conflict under the state act.
Doesn't that tip the balance, though? Like, I'm sorry, but like something like the zoning hearing board, where a 3-3 vote has a particular application, and we're changing that balance? Meaning like a 3-3 vote would be a
No vote.
non-approval, and then that's it. So we're tipping that balance. Okay, I think it's a mistake.
Well, the difference
let me-
is,
let me
3 of the
think about
commissioners
that.
could say, Bill, you belong to the Conservancy, so you can't vote on this open space acquisition. It's 3-3, you know? And
We have a motion made and seconded
the
to table.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I don't care.
Thank you.
I'm going to jail.
Next is Parks and Rec. We have a motion to approve the update to the current 1991 open space plan.
This is the motion that's taken a month and a half to get going here. I am moving to authorize a subcommittee of the Open Space Committee to move forward with the first phase of updating our 1991 open space plan as it was presented in the September 22nd public meeting.
I'll second the motion.
And the cost is?
0.
0.
Okay.
Do we need to specify the members or anything like that?
They're all within the Open Space
They're all
Committee.
currently part of
I
the
mean,
open
there aren't
So
any.
they have they been formed yet or not
Yeah,
formed?
Yeah.
yeah, I believe so. It's a subset of the Open Space Committee. I think it's 3 or 4 people.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Any public discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, motion to authorize filing of a Pico Green region open space program grant application. It's a $10,000 request for updating the open space plan, and it requires a 50-50 match. I move to introduce. No,
Second.
Authorized.
it's a motion. Move
So
authorized.
now I'm confused because we said that there was no cost to the open space plan.
No, that gets them running. This is a grant that if we
No, it
get
says
it,
it
then we can.
requires a 50-50 match.
$10,000.
But is this to hire an outside consultant then to assist the committee?
No, this is a separate grant program that there's an upcoming deadline, December. This would be one of the sources of funding that would go into getting a plan together.
And this is just to approve the grant application. There's
Right.
there's not
Right.
even,
And
okay,
it's the
I'm
same old
fine.
story. If we're not happy with it, we don't accept it.
But I'm confused, back to John's question. When we approved I, we were told there's no cost. Does this have anything to do with I?
No, this has to do with I+. So once they've completed I, they're going to come back to us.
Right.
And at that time, they're going to ask for authorization to spend money,
To do what?
the open space plan, to update the open space.
Well, we just said that, we just motioned it to,
Well, they're going to apply for funds and do all kinds of things to try and get the money so that they can get our approval. If we don't have
The
enough money, we
things
can't
they
approve
can
it.
do without outside help.
The reason this is in front of us now is because there's a December deadline. This is one of the grants that they'll be looking at, but the grant proposal needs to be put in, and it
but I
came
come
up.
back
and-
to what was stated under I, was that there's no cost. Am I,
But there is no
cost
cost. It doesn't
for
cost to
that
apply for a
vote you
grant.
just gave.
For the first phase of this, in which the open space group, there's no cost. That's volunteer time in that to be able to
Okay.
put this all together, to organize this, to get to the point to say, what is the cost going to be to do this? If we can use staff time in doing part of this, if there's other grants we can go for. But because of the
So is I
deadline,
essentially an approval to develop a plan to update the open space plan?
a plan to be able to come back with numbers to what the Board of Commissioners would consider moving forward with updating the plan using outside sources. So all that is just legwork that's being done to assemble what a cost could be, what a cost could look like to update the plan. But also, as Commissioner Schaefer had pointed out, I brought this forward, this grant application from PICO. It's because there's an opportunity here to go after $10,000.
I'm not opposed to Jay at all. What's confusing me is there was a statement made that it costs us nothing to update the current 1991 open space plan, but I think that wasn't probably.
I
That's
think
not
what it
right.
was
That's not the
For this
statement that
committee
was
to look
made.
into updating the plan. The
Right.
plan's going to cost $90,000 or something.
Okay,
you know,
so just make sure the minutes accurately reflect that when they get drafted, please.
And Mr. Jankowski, you're shaking your head, so you're in favor of this?
Yes.
Motion made and second. Any further discussion? Any public discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Public health.
No report.
Public safety.
The first item on the agenda is Resolution 2010-45, modifying resolution numbers 2006-05 and 2006-26 for permanent traffic movements at Villanova University.
Move the approval.
I'd like to make an amendment. In the last paragraph, last sentence, it says Villanova University's commencement day events only. They would like that to read weekend events only. They'll need it just for the 2 days to help with the entire weekend's commencement proceedings.
Commencement weekend events.
Pretty much, yeah.
Second as amended.
Okay, first we'll vote on the amendment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any discussion further? Any public discussion? Chris doesn't want to come up. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
The only other item is the announcement that the Radnor Fire Company Auxiliary will be hosting the Italian dinner buffet
All right.
on Sunday, November 14th from
Good
4 to
stuff.
7 p.m. at the Radnor Firehouse, 121 South Wayne Avenue. You can dine in or take out. So please come, enjoy the Italian dinner buffet, and support the Radnor Fire Company Auxiliary. Again, it's November 14th, Sunday, 4 to 7
You have the
p.m.
price there?
There is no price, but I'm sure that they'll
It's usually what?
charge you at the door.
It's usually $7 a
Yes.
person. Unless they raise it. Okay.
Ready? Old business.
I just have one item, and that is do we have, or can we get an update on the status of the Shimoni Road sidewalk planning? Thank you.
I wanted to bring up we had a discussion at the last meeting concerning the minutes and
Yes, how much
the
detail?
structure of the minutes.
Right.
And I just wanted to clarify, I'm raising question with the transcript form in which the minutes are currently being taken and the fact that there is some paraphrasing going on in those minutes. And I think it would be worthwhile for us to look at this a little bit closer and just determine whether we want transcription-like minutes, transcription minutes with a court reporter, or are we willing to do the minimal requirement on the far end of this continuum of what's required under the Sunshine Act, which is just recording who's present, how'd you vote, and what we voted on. What I'm seeing is, even though the minutes are getting better and better, I still think it seems to me to be a administrative nightmare to, in essence, transcribe what we're saying. And my concern is that depending on who's doing it and how much time is devoted to that process, they may or may not get it right. And then it becomes our burden to proofread and somehow remember what we said verbatim against what is recorded in the minutes as they're stated. I'm not comfortable doing that. I've done some transcription of our meetings in the past, line by line, and just a 5-minute session took 4 hours to transcribe word for word. So I don't want to have to repeat that, and I don't want staff to have to repeat that. But I think what we may want to do is maybe come together on what we think is adequate, not only under the requirements of the Sunshine Act, but adequate in terms of providing transparency to our electorate.
I'll add my thoughts. To me, the key is that the minutes are what 4 votes of the commissioners say they are. So as long as we have the authority to modify them, then to me the appropriate form is not terribly problematic. You're right that it becomes troublesome when it's paraphrased, and then if we don't have the opportunity to change that, then it's problematic. So I'm going to continue to unfortunately wordsmith them the way I think they should be to be accurate. And if that becomes, if others do the same and all of a sudden it becomes cumbersome, then we'd have to identify another form.
But my only question, Don, and I agree with you in concept, however, are you actually watching the video and transcribing?
No,
because the minutes have to reflect exactly what's said.
No, the minutes don't have to reflect. It's
no,
not
if they're going to paraphrase,
yeah,
and if they're going to claim to be a transcription.
Well, they're not a transcription. They're not claiming to be a transcription, are they? Because they're not. They're a summary.
At least on my read, it's implied.
Okay.
And that's the problem. It's implied. 10 years from now, someone will say,
Yeah.
"Well, Fisher said this," and that may not be the case.
You can deny it 10 years later. No one will remember.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've identified the problem. One benefit of recently, they've come at least with our name, and then you can be responsible for your own particular item. I think that's an improvement. I'd say at this point, I'm not ready to make the change. I'm just going to continue to try it. As long as I can change them the way I think that to make them accurate, then I'm going to support the current form. But if there's some mechanism to prevent commissioners from changing them to be accurate as the commissioner sees them, then I think we'd have to go to a different form.
Maybe a little comment from Bob Zinkowski on the administrative load this creates with the current form of the minutes.
Again, it's going to be that determination, because what's happening is in the past meetings here, they've been taken verbatim in some areas of quotes, and I know there's been some times where it has shown like a duplication of motions, but actually there were 2 different motions. So the issue is going to be that determination of who is going to take that determination of how we're going to go to. And I know, just speaking with John here, someone to come in as a court reporter will be extremely expensive to be able to do that. The other option is just having someone specifically that would be able to just come in and take minutes of these meetings, to be able to put them together. Because again, the administrative time back and forth to be able to go through this, the time to listen through the DVD and go through and try to summarize these and get all the appropriate statements correct, and then go back into them again and rechange these a lot, because again, there are times that the wordsmithing's taking place, which is in contradiction of actually what was said. So it's going to be those kind of determinations that are going to have to be made. So there's going to have to be some determination made by the board of what you want to see reflected. And if it's verbatim, word for word, there's a cost associated with that, if not paraphrasing this. But again, you know, I think we're getting so far into the details of this as to words here and there that there's a cost going to be incurred by that.
So your recommendation is that we just have the official action reported, and that's all?
I think you want to be able to record some of the dialogue, but again, too, you're paraphrasing that, because if you get resident comments that come in, you know, when do you stop if someone comes in and speaks in regards to, you know, the Veterans Day ceremony and them helping out with the cemetery, is it going to be someone's of the board to say, well, I want more in this, and then someone else is less? Then we don't even get a read of what.
So
it is.
what you're saying is that the motions and then a short paraphrasing what someone said. If somebody wants to correct something, they can, but that's what you would like to see.
I think we could do that, but again, too, is if we, you know, the issue is we could try to get the minutes out, and if you want to, you know, make an adjustment. But again, I think there's some adjustments being made that are not of what was said, and that's what we have to do, is what was said in the meeting.
Yeah, but that's the
Has to
decision.
be.
That's the decision of the votes of the board, not the person recording them. Correct.
Well, but I
the
also
person
think
recording them submits them respectfully or submits them, but what actually goes in the minutes is a decision by the board.
But I think Bob's concern is sometimes what's said may not be exactly what was intended, and then we come back after the fact and we.
You're exactly right. You can't change what was said. You're
Kevin's
exactly right.
He changes it all the time. He didn't say that.
So you can't change what was said, but when you paraphrase something, you change what was said. So the minutes in and of themselves are changing what was said because they are selective. And so it's the commissioners who decide what was selected, what was appropriately removed or not removed.
But your concern is that a commissioner could change exactly what he said, and the other commissioners don't remember, so they just vote with him.
Exactly,
Right.
and then all of a sudden they're reflected in the minutes.
Let me do it figuratively. There's a continuum here. You have the minutes that are required under the Sunshine Act, which are really minimal, and then you have transcription on the far other side. We're trying to play in the middle, and the problem with that is I barely have enough time to remember what I said and to review the video. I don't have time to see what all of you have said.
Yes.
So if you challenge what you said and it gets re-recorded as a new statement, we've corrupted the minutes.
Yes, and that's I think you've
that's my
accurately
concern.
identified the dilemma. And even the solution that I propose doesn't resolve that dilemma, because if I change, I mean, essentially, I'm very careful about the minutes and making sure that what I said was accurate, but I'm less careful about you. And so there is that likelihood or that possibility that something could go through and not be as accurate as it would otherwise be.
Bob, do you have an estimate of how much, rough estimate? Are we talking about a full day of effort for the person taking the minutes, 2 days of effort? Just,
I mean,
in
you've
the
got
context of our budget,
several days of time that is taken to
I
go
think we
through
need
and
to
put
cut
these
back
together.
How
But
about then using John's, bare bones
I mean, my
transcription? How about then around
But what
25,
Commissioner
25%?
Spengler says
you
is
have
actually
the-
right. You can, because you don't like something the way you did, and say, well, I've got a second chance to recorrect that, so it's going back. That's going to be the problem, and then for that change, you're going to have to go back and review that again to make sure that is so. I mean, we're going to add layers of time. I think it's good to have minutes that have detail to it, but I think the issues coming in is we're looking into these words and trying to wordsmith this to where it's what someone might have said and maybe not said, that because they're reflected in the minutes may reflect poorly upon them of how they relayed that information.
I think in the
which
current
is problematic.
environment, we shouldn't be spending a ton of time, and it sounds like we are spending way more time on these minutes than is appropriate, given the constrained resources we have.
Don't we keep the recordings of the meetings in some location for a certain period of time?
Yes, so we have those on DVD, and again, that could be a policy that's made that these DVDs will have multiple backups to them, that'll be a permanent record, so in case there's a question to that, you could go back and
See,
go
I'm
through the-
inclined to go with a bare bones minutes format as long as we have the video backup.
Yeah, the important thing is the vote. You know, what I say, you know, it doesn't have to be saved for history.
Is it required to have approved minutes? Is another option to just have unapproved minutes and then, or is there a requirement that they have to be approved?
Right. I mean, they're
Or is
not
it
minutes. They're not minutes till you approve them, vote on them, and approve them. Then they go in your minute book.
And the
But
minute
we're
book is really a
we are
book of the
required to
official
keep
actions of the
minutes.
township, so we know exactly
Right.
what we voted on and who
Yeah,
voted
there's no
what.
question.
I mean, one of the things, you know, and townships are from here to, there's one township that has a court reporter. It's been doing it for 20 years. And it's in another county, but you need to have the substance of the discussion, not quotes, you know, and that's where I think you get in when you start quoting people. But you can hire a recording secretary, someone that actually has sat through municipal meetings, and that's what they do. You know, whether you want them to sit through a meeting or just look at the video and do the minutes from the video, I think that's what's occurring now by the staff.
It's in the fiscally constrained environment, we have to have an employee or a contractor spend it sounds like they're spending 2-3 days a week, you know, trying to get these minutes right. It just doesn't make sense to me, given our legal requirements.
But I also think based on, Peggy Hagan has been out with an illness, so she's been out for a while. So then you have someone else that steps in, and again, too, she's been at this for a number of for a period of time where she understands, you know, how the discussion may go and being able to paraphrase that. And then you have someone else come in and they have a different take of how that paraphrasing goes. So again, I think it's easier to have a standard of how that goes, but a lot of this conversation is going to, I think we're possibly changing the context of what was said.
So what you recommend is the minutes reflect the official votes that we take, and that's it. Is that what you're saying?
What you have to reflect in your minutes is who's there,
Now, if I'm asking the manager,
the votes, the substance of any discussion, the substance of public comment.
you have to have you have to have
There's got to be
substance.
some state, but it.
Okay.
Well, I have to say I'm in the minority here. I really think there's tremendous value and a certain level of detail in the minutes. I don't think people 10 years from now or 10 weeks from now are going to go pull every meeting and watch it. I don't think we need to do quotes, but some level of detail of the discussion, the back and forth a little bit. I don't think it suffices to have just the vote and the substance. I myself have referred to minutes many, many times, and I think they're a vital resource and for our citizens who are trying to keep up. I don't agree that we should make it bare bones. I certainly don't want to go hiring someone to take minutes, but I do think we can reach some sort. I don't.
You're not. Nobody's going to do them for free. You're paying someone to do it.
You know
Somebody hired
what?
someone to do it.
We can come to a place where we have a system that works. I really believe we can. Every PTO, every nonprofit comes to that place. It's not insurmountable. So just for the record, I really.
Thank you. I agree with Elaine. I'm not advocating for the minimal recording of minutes. I'm just concerned with the quality of them. And if we're going to continue to do what we do, I'm okay with that, but we really need to somehow set the standards for how much. Because I'm seeing the minutes, if I look at the minutes from 10 years ago, and I have done this, they were 1 page, maybe a page and a half. Simple roll call vote, what the motion was, who voted, and that's it. We come today, we're up to about 9 pages in some instances, and I'm having great issue with the quality of those. And not to disparage staff, it's not their job to be court reporter. And if someone's going to quote me, I prefer it to be in transcript form, and that way I don't have to worry about arguing what I said or how I said it. It's what I said. If I said something stupid, then it lives forever. So I don't have the answer to this. I'm just glad we're having this discussion. I just want everyone to recognize the burden on staff that is currently in place that I perceive. I believe it's a huge burden. But
Well,
I think it's worth it if it's done well.
In 30 years, I never had anybody quote me from the minutes,
But I look at this, this is a board decision. The board is going to have to decide. I mean, anywhere that you say in the middle is where's the middle at? Because I can hear from 7 different people, 7 different opinions on where the middle is. So I think the board needs to either make a decision, either we're going to have bare bones, or we're going to get into the transcription of
I
this.
don't want to
it's,
decide tonight.
it's either
I don't know what
or.
others do.
I don't want to decide tonight, I just want to bring it up. And I like the caveat that we need to retain, even though there's document retention laws, if we're going to rely on video, we have to make sure that those videos are kept in the Secretary's vault and that this information is available 10 years down the road if someone wanted to refer to it, and that it's preserved. So that's another big discussion there.
What are we preserving for 10 years, John? We're preserving the votes. The vote is the important thing. How people voted, how things got passed, not what you had to say 10 years from now. You know, we're creating all this work so that people can read what you had to say 10 years ago correctly.
Well, I'm not speaking for me, I'm speaking for you. You'll be here 10 years, I probably
Well, yeah,
won't
but I'll
be
tell
here.
you, 30 years, no one's ever misquoted me from the minutes, you know? It's not an issue.
New business. Bob, you want to talk to us about this crosswalk?
Sure. This was an item that goes back to 2007, in which there was agreement based on some litigation that was brought in a settlement agreement. This is actually going ahead and getting this project completed. Lower Merion has taken lead on this, so it would just be the township share of this for $7,500.
Move the approval.
Is it budgeted? It's in the budget, okay.
It's in the capital budget.
A second. Moved and second. Any further discussion? Any public discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Discussion of Charter Review Commission. Assume that's Bob.
John is reaching
Oh, John.
into his bag here. I know this is an item that we had brought up earlier in regards to charter review. I know in my time reviewing through the charter, there are several items that are within the charter that I think warrant the opportunity to have a look at, again, since its inception over 30 years ago, that updating this would be something that would be recommended from the administration to go through this process. Past experience has shown this to be very beneficial. And I know John has been working on this, so John, at this point.
Well, the board, you received from me 2 memos.
Yeah.
The board's received from me 2 memos, one which spells out basically what the procedure is, would be by ordinance, and then what the time frame would be at the next possible election. The other one is just a list of some of the issues which I've noticed need some change, and that we've identified over the last year in the charter that I think would make for more efficient government. You know, I think the process, I mean, my suggestion in terms of the process and would be to put a group together, you know, that would review this, and Bob's got a lot of experience doing it, and go through page by page of the charter. There may be some other things in there that I haven't come across that ought to be cleaned up. You have a short list from me. I know Bob has his own list, and you all may have individual things that you think need to be cleaned up, but the charter is going to be like your code, like the borough code, the township code. So it's outdated. A lot of it is really good, the way it's set up. But some of the things like the bidding limits, you're paying a lot of money to bid things out that for $3,000 or more. There's never been a cost of living increase or any bump in that bid threshold. So that's my suggestion in terms of moving forward. In order to do an ordinance, you're going to have to go through the normal ordinance process. If you convene a group to specifically address this, whatever you want to call that group, they're going to have to come back with an ordinance to introduce to the board, probably in January or February by the latest, in order to make, if you're shooting for next spring, for that.
Have you done the count back from the primary to see when?
Yes.
What kind of date, what kind of calendar?
the primary election date for 2011 is May 17th. Now, I didn't confirm that with Delaware County.
No,
I
that's it.
got that from another source. You've got to then have the question, the ordinance, 13th Tuesday before then, which would be February 15th of 2011. So in order to introduce an ordinance, advertise an ordinance, you're looking at
John, should we target November instead of February? I mean, my opinion is that is not.
Yeah,
It's
that's
way too
that's
short.
not
Too
working.
much, too much.
Look,
to
there
happen.
are,
Yeah,
I think
I mean-
there are things that need to be looked at. It's a matter of opinion. There'll be at least two people here who disagree with me, but I happen to believe there should be term limits. That's, again, my opinion. There are things like that that I think really need a robust
No, I
discussion.
I don't disagree. I'm not suggesting you shoot for the spring, but that's the next one up. That's the next time you could do this. I mean, there may be, there's a lot of things in here you can play with and change. We did one of these with Horsham Township about 10 years ago, so you saw what they did. They had a small number of issues. I think you need to focus on the important issues, the things that have really been problematic.
But if we have to take it to the voters, shouldn't we just do it right the first time?
I agree, but I believe that some of these municipalities have done this more than once. I mean, things come up over time. In fact, I think Horsham's done it twice already.
Ballpark, what does it cost us to take it to the voters?
What are your costs? You're going to put together a group, a volunteer group, to make recommendations. That list of recommendations,
They're going to have a paid consultant or somebody to, no?
No. I'm going to put an ordinance together, but you see what an ordinance looks like. It's not a legal brief or anything. That then goes to the Board of Elections. There's a question that's got to be put together in accordance with the election code. So you're not, unless you're going to bring somebody in, someone else to make a review of this, the costs are going to be relatively minimal.
It just, I'd like to think about it. It shouldn't be a practice, in my opinion, that we're constantly, and constantly may be an overstatement, but that we're constantly revising the home rule charter. The difference between February and November, to me, is.
You can't do February. We never get the people pointing.
All right, so I think that's.
Yeah, really, if we had the discussion tonight, you come forward with a resolution or an ordinance, whatever it is, to establish the commission, and you have to interview for it, and then you're into the holidays, and you're just kind of compressing too much into a short period of time. I think whatever group we decide should go forward with this should have the luxury of some time to come back with a good, healthy recommendation to us.
John, have you ever seen situations where there's opposition and they get into a campaign and it becomes like an expensive ordeal?
I have not had that happen. We've done, I think, 3 or 4 of these in a borough and in a township.
But usually by the time it gets through the process, it's got consensus behind it.
Because you have an
Right.
ordinance that's got to be adopted, and you're going to have the debate and discussion over that ordinance like you will over any ordinance.
So they can't take it directly to the voters. They have to come to us, and we have to approve it going on the ballot in that form.
Well, it would be an ordinance that this board approves. I mean, you're not setting up a commission like was done.
The Home Rule Commission.
At the beginning.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Those folks get elected.
Yeah, okay.
They got elected, and then if you want to
Yeah.
do an amendment, you can have a vote or petition for an amendment, but the way I've seen it done is by ordinance. So you go through that public process, you set up a committee or a group, whatever you want to call that, and let them do the work that initial commission did when you went to home rule.
Then we vote to put it on the ballot.
Yes, you vote on the ordinance, and that ordinance is what gets put on the ballot in the form of a referendum question.
All right, I've got the name. It's the HRCRC, which is the Home Rule Charter Review Committee. And I would ask, unless the board sees differently, I would ask that we draw up a resolution spelling out the requirements, how many, and have that for us maybe at the next meeting. it could be very similar to the previous ones we've done.
And I think
Sounds reasonable to me.
as part of the process, I think November is the best way to go. The ones I've been involved with in the past usually have been formed early January, and then they usually stay at it all the way through May and start to put their recommendations together for discussion June and July, and then send it to the board for approval, and then onto the ballot. One of the amendments more than likely will be how the commission is formed, the timetable and that. So you may have a lot that go on just to set up the process of this as well. But it's, in my opinion, I think Commissioner Schaefer speaks about campaigns would be the radical changes, which would be a change of form of government, or those items where you may see those items come out. But all the Charter Review Commission meetings are open to the public. The public have the opportunity to speak and to discuss all those different options. So, you know, I highly recommend. One of the items that have just come up recently is that $3,000, which it's very possible that even blanket POs cannot exceed more than $3,000 per year, which then would really put our hands in really the operation of the township.
Do we have any flexibility in something like that, short of the home rule charter adjustment?
You mean
To do the
making changes short of that?
Yeah, can we like?
Now, can we pick up 4 items, debate it here publicly amongst us without a committee, and put it on the ballot in the primary?
No,
I'm
he's
just saying, rather than
you're
revise.
talking about the PO.
Yeah, is there something we can do? Because I do agree the $3,000 is.
No.
Is, okay, so we're locked into
Yeah,
$3,000.
you're locked into it. All the codes have a bid threshold. Yours has that bid threshold, and it has
What's
some
that?
extra
No,
limitations
what
on
I'm
it.
saying is, if you wanted to do it quickly, you could just pick out 4 financial items, you know, that are concerned, and we could pass an ordinance and put that on the ballot and get them done.
Yeah, I
know?
mean, there is some merit to that, like a
Rather-
two-tiered approach,
Because
right?
because if you open up to the public and they get in there with term limits and the salary of commissioners and elected at large, you know, they can come up with any recommendation at all. Then it can be a big political hubbub. But if the commissioners came up with things that are going to help our financial situation, okay?
Right.
To the benefit of the taxpayers, a very simple, these 4 items will help us run more efficiently and save money. And vote for them, put them on the ballot primary, let the people vote for them, and we can do that. We can have public discussions, we can, you know, put that on the ballot. It's a simple thing, you vote yes or no on the question to save money. There's no controversial issues on the thing that we're going to have a campaign about.
And that
I'd like
could
to make a
occur-
statement that will shock many people, but I agree with Bill again.
And that could
Hope
occur
Jim
in
didn't run
parallel
out of
to the larger policy, we could,
Well,
correct?
we're both Irish, that's what it is.
So we could do that and pursue a larger, broader analysis
Yes.
simultaneously.
Take care of those things that
Yes.
are screwing up the operation.
No, I think that makes sense, but.
But yeah, what we could, yeah.
Any further?
But what are those 3 things we're talking?
No, the manager
Well,
has to
let
come
Bob
back and
propose
tell
it.
us. You have to come back and tell us, what
Okay.
are the financial things that are in the charter that are hamstringing us and operating more efficiently and saving the taxpayers money? And then we go in and we get, in the primary, we go in and get these non-controversial issues approved, because it's all about saving money and, you know.
We can do that.
Yeah.
That's it.
Any further new business?
Just have one quick announcement. REACH, the group, the community group that is a coalition of parents, school professionals, private, public, dealing with drug and alcohol in youth. They are having a meeting on November 9th at the Cream and Sugar Cafe. They're calling this REACH Coffee Shop Discussion, and they're going to be doing some scenarios. So if you're a parent raising an adolescent, what would you do if type thing. We'll have an officer there. We'll have some parents and people from all crosses of the community. And it is from 5:30 to 7, which is, I know, a little bit of a weird time, but that's, I believe, when the coffee shop was available. So it's Tuesday, November 9th, from 5:30 to 7 at the Cream and Sugar Cafe. Thanks.
Any public comment? No.
I'm Kathy Mulroy from the Radnor Memorial Library, and I'm sorry I didn't get this to Elaine quickly enough, but we're very excited. You may remember seeing in the Inquirer a front page article about Sam Katz's Liberty Productions, and that he's putting together a group of short films about Philadelphia history. Well, they showed it at the Constitution Center, and I'm pleased to announce that we will be showing them also at the Radnor Memorial Library on Sunday, November 7th. Mr. Katz will be here to show both the film that he's done, the pilot he's put together about 1876 Philadelphia. And there will also be an 18-minute short film about Bishop Richard Allen, who, as you remember, we did a program in conjunction with the Historical Society about Richard Allen in Radnor, and then you renamed a park for Richard Allen. Well, this is an 18-minute film about his history in Philadelphia. So we're very excited to be able to bring this particular set of films to Radnor, so you don't have to go down to the city to see them. And again, it will be Sunday, November 7th, and the doors will open at 2 o'clock. The filming will start at 2:30. And we do ask you to please register in advance because we already have about 60 people signed up. We only seat 120. So if you're interested, you can go on our website, you can call the library, or you can come into the library and register. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.